Chapter 1754. At this moment Mao Zhen was in a mess. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind. Although the three-eyed eagle clan's bloodline was not comparable to the two ancient divine beasts, it was still considered quite noble. The eagle master in front of him was actually willing to form a contract with a human? And the little girl next to it? That was a real crimson gold heavenly phoenix. She was actually willing to give up this face? This was not the most terrifying thing. The most terrifying thing was that not only did these two divine beasts form contracts with humans, but they also formed contracts with the same person. Didn't he just stay here for a little longer? Why did the outside world become like this? Besides, 1,000 years was nothing compared to the tens of thousands of years that the crimson gold heavenly phoenix and the three-eyed eagle had existed, right? How could... Mao Zhen was in a daze. He looked at Dumpling and Xichen for a while and his fingers were trembling slightly. You... Dumpling's eyes were bright as she flaunted in a crisp voice. I've been with Ayu for longer than Xichen. Xichen looked back and glanced at her. Dumpling made a face and her chubby little face was full of pride. Xichen's eyes moved slightly and he calmly retracted his gaze. Mao Zhen pointed at Dumpling and almost couldn't catch his breath. You this. What's there to flaunt about? You're the incomparably noble ancient divine beast, the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Do your clansmen know that you're so happy here? Even if the relationship between the Great Phoenix Dragon clan and the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan was very subtle, and they habitually disliked each other, Mao Zhen couldn't help but feel heartache for the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan at this moment. How could there be such a weirdo? Not only did she form a contract with a human, but she also served the same master as the three-eyed eagle. Most importantly, she was so happy. Mao Zhen didn't understand. He really didn't understand. When he saw Dumpling previously, he had doubts in his heart. Firstly, he felt that it was quite strange for her to be able to take human form at such a young age. Secondly, she had been tightly tugging on the corner of that human woman's clothes, looking very intimate. It was just that he had been thinking about how to deal with the ancestral inheritance, so he didn't have time to think about it. Who knew this would happen? Chu Luiwei gently rubbed Dumpling's head and smiled at Mao Zhen. Senior Mao Zhen, I'm sorry, but Dumpling is still young and innocent. Don't take her words to heart. Mao Zhen's mouth twitched. Children's words carry no harm. He had lived for so many years and still never knew that this term could actually be used on the crimson gold celestial phoenix. Mao Zhen took a deep breath, closed her eyes and held her forehead in pain. Even though he didn't have a physical body, he still felt a headache coming on. What kind of people were they waiting for? Right at this moment, the sound of footsteps suddenly came from the forest in the distance. It seemed like someone was heading this way. Mao Zhen's expression turned serious as she glanced in that direction. Chu Luiwei and Rong Xiu exchanged glances. The person who came should be one of the 4 people who participated in the Thousand Peaks Summit and were still here. However, after a while the footsteps gradually faded away. It seemed that person had left. Soon the footsteps completely disappeared. It seemed that the person had already left. Chu Luiwei subconsciously looked at Mao Zhen. If that person had come here just now, perhaps he could have obtained their ancestors' inheritance from Mao Zhen. After all, compared to an outsider like Xichen, their own juniors were much more suitable candidates. However, Mao Zhen's expression was calm as if he was already used to it. Actually, over the years the Thousand Peak Summit has been held many times and many good juniors have come every time. A few of them, like the one just now, have found their way here. Mao Zhen suddenly spoke in a much calmer tone. However, none of them have walked through the forest and really come here. Chu Luiwei saw a trace of desolation on his face. In fact, if he thought about it carefully, it was understandable. After all, Mao Zhen was a great phoenix dragon. If possible, he would have wanted to leave this inheritance to an outstanding descendant. As he said, he no longer had a physical body, so there was no point in leaving this inheritance with him. If not for the fact that he really had no other choice, why would he choose Xichen? After experiencing too many disappointments, his hot-bloodedness would eventually cool down. In the battle back then, my physical body was damaged and my strength was exhausted. Although I managed to preserve my life here, I'm attached to this lake and can't leave. In addition, things like opportunities are the most unpredictable and can't be forced. Those children have no fate with me or my ancestors' inheritance. Mao Zhen had already thought about this. Although it was inevitable that he felt regretful, life was not as good as he thought. Even he was the same. He looked at Zhou Xian and there seemed to be waves in his eyes. These descendants of the clan came here one after another, but they didn't notice my presence. You're not one of us and you have nothing to do with the great Phoenix Dragon clan, but you still came here. Perhaps this was really the will of the heavens. Mao Zhen suddenly paused halfway through. In fact, there was no point in saying these words. Zhou Xian was unwilling to accept this inheritance, and he had already formed a contract with Chu Liyue. These 2 points were enough to make Mao Zhen give up his initial idea. A forcibly picked melon was not sweet. His only regret was that after today he still didn't know how long he would have to wait to find a suitable successor. Rong Xiu suddenly said. Senior Mao Zhen, are you really willing to be trapped here forever? Mao Zhen was stunned. Of course he was not willing. He had not avenged Mao Yang. He had not taken back what he had lost. But now he had almost nothing and it was not easy to find a successor, but it was not suitable. What else could he do? He looked at Rong Xiu in shock. What do you mean? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. Nothing. To be honest, clan leader Mao Yang was very rude to you, and me before and made things difficult for us. At the Thousand Summit he said that if you, and I did not erase our memories of coming here, we would be imprisoned on Divine Dragon Island forever. You are the successor of the great Phoenix Dragon ancestor. Whether it is talent or other things, you are better than Mao Yang. As long as the truth is clarified, the position of clan leader will definitely change. At that time, you will be able to take back what belongs to you, and we will be able to leave Divine Dragon Island openly. Why not kill 2 birds with 1 stone? Mao Zhen narrowed his eyes. You want to form an alliance with me? Rong Xiu smiled frankly. If we can be on good terms with you, it will be our honor. Mao Zhen closed his eyes. Countless scenes of the past surged out from the depths of his mind. After a long time he said in a deep voice. I don't have a physical body. If I leave here my soul will be destroyed. Rong Xiu asked. What if we can help you reconstruct your physical body? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1755. Outside the Great Void Temple the crowd was still waiting. More than 20 days had passed, and there was still one person inside who hadn't come out. Mao Yang sat on his chair with a faint smile on his face. The atmosphere in the square was also very lively. This was because the 3 people who came out not long ago had also obtained very good inheritances. Including the one who came out first, 4 of the 5 people who stayed behind had already obtained very good results. Of course, everyone was relieved. As long as the last person did not make any mistakes and successfully obtained the inheritance, the Thousand Peak Gathering would end smoothly. Although it was not as good as the previous Thousand Peaks Gathering, it was much better than the situation that everyone was worried about. Most of the people in the square were relaxed and happy. They were chatting in groups of 3 to 5. It's been so long and Mao Su still hasn't come out. He must have obtained a top inheritance. I think so too. In the previous Thousand Peaks Gathering, the last person to come out was basically the most outstanding. This time, Mao Su is no exception. In comparison, Mao Shang, who was the first to obtain the inheritance, is not that outstanding. Suddenly, someone snorted in a strange tone. That's not necessarily true. The crowd was silent for a moment. The person who spoke was a middle-aged man with an ordinary appearance and an unhappy expression. Whether or not one can obtain a good inheritance in the Great Void Temple does affect one's future to a large extent. But that is not absolute. Some people are destined to become strong. Even if they don't perform well once, they will definitely become strong in the future. There are also people who may be in the limelight for a while, but the final outcome is uncertain. Many people secretly exchanged glances. They were all from the same clan, so of course they were familiar with each other. This man was Mao Shang's biological father. He had been very happy and proud when Mao Shang obtained the inheritance. Hearing these words now, of course he felt very irritated. Don't forget that our clan leader was not the last to come out, but now. He snorted and did not continue speaking. But the meaning of his words was clear to everyone. Some people's expressions changed slightly, and they subconsciously looked at Mao Yang. Actually, there was nothing wrong with what he said, but the point was, back then clan leader Mao Yang had participated in the same Thousand Peaks Gathering as that person, and they had also entered the Great Void Temple together. Most importantly, that person was the last to come out of the Thousand Peaks Gathering. Mao Zhen. This name had become a taboo in the Great Void Phoenix Dragon race. Everyone subconsciously ignored this name as if that person had never existed. Even some matters related to him were extremely sensitive and would not be brought up. Now that the patriarch heard this, seemingly sensing that the atmosphere was a little strange, the person who spoke was suddenly startled. Immediately he looked at Mao Yang with some uneasiness. Mao Yang looked over and smiled faintly. Well said. No one knows who will emerge victorious until the very end. The one who had the last laugh was the true powerhouse. Everyone nodded in agreement. No one was more qualified than Mao Yang to say this. Back then, Mao Zhen was extremely talented and she was the undisputed #1 among the younger generation of the Great Phoenix Dragon race. At that time, all of his peers were enveloped by his halo. Even Mao Yang was the same. But who would have thought that so many things would happen later on? This small ripple quickly calmed down and everyone quickly moved on to other topics. Mao Yang leaned back in his chair and retracted his gaze, his eyelids drooping slightly. Mao Zhen. Even though that person had been dead for thousands of years, he could not help but be filled with disgust and jealousy when he thought of this name again. For many years he had lived in Mao Zhen's shadow. When it came to geniuses, successors and the future, the first person the entire race would mention was definitely Mao Zhen. But he, Mao Yang, was not even remembered by name. He had lived such a life for too long and he had had enough. Fortunately, in the end, Mao Zhen died and the position of patriarch became his. Everyone gradually forgot about that person and regarded him as the highest, competing to chase after him. Everything went according to his plan except for one thing. Until now, he had not found the ancestors' inheritance. He had always been brooding about this. In fact, the inheritance he had obtained back then was not bad, but it was a pity that compared to Mao Zhen's inheritance, it was worlds apart. After all, in the entire Great Phoenix Dragon race, only Mao Zhen alone had obtained the ancestors' inheritance in 10,000 years. Of course, Mao Yang was very jealous. In order to obtain this, he had used almost all means. Unfortunately, Mao Yang collected his thoughts, raised his eyes, and looked at the Great Void Temple in front of him. Perhaps after the 1000 Summit ended, he should personally make a trip to Seven Lotus Mountain. The Great Phoenix Dragon is an ancient divine beast. Once its physical body is damaged, it cannot be recovered. Even the Great Phoenix Dragon race can't solve this problem. You're just a human. Where did you get the courage to say that you can help me reconstruct my physical body? After Rong Xiu finished his sentence, the entire place fell silent. Mao Zhen was silent for a while, then opened his mouth to refute. He obviously did not believe that Rong Xiu had the strength to do so. Actually, Rong Xiu had expected all of Rong Xiu's reactions. He took a step forward, his expression calm and indifferent. The Great Phoenix Dragon race can't do it, but it doesn't mean that I can't. At this moment, only one thought flashed through Mao Zhen's mind. Arrogant. Instead he laughed and said, "Oh? Then tell me, what ability and confidence do you have to make me believe you?" Rong Xiu raised his hand. A cluster of golden flames gushed out from his palm. The surrounding temperature instantly rose by a lot. Mao Zhen's expression froze as he stared at the flames. You probably don't know, but the first one to condense the residual blood you left in the cave on Seven Lotus Mountain was not Zichen, but me. Of course, Zichen could also do this, but he was one step ahead. Hearing this, Mao Zhen's expression finally changed. Rong Xiu continued. Also, when you and I came, we accidentally stepped on the jade disc used for testing at the 1000 Summit. But you don't have to worry, I have completely repaired it. Speaking of this, the corners of his lips curled into a smile. What I said just now is all true. I wonder if this is enough to convince you? Of course, Mao Zhen did not doubt the truth of Rong Xiu's words. Those who could do these two things were not ordinary people. Moreover, the truth would be known with a simple investigation. There was really no need to lie. Then, did he really have the ability? Mao Zhen was silent for a long time before he said, "Even if I believe you, what do you plan to do? You have to know that in this world, there is no fiend beast skeleton that can replace the Great Phoenix Dragon and help it reconstruct its physical body." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1756. Zichen might be able to use the wings of the Great Phoenix Dragon to rebuild his body and even increase his own strength. But the Great Phoenix Dragon was different. The great phoenix dragon was an ancient divine beast with the noblest bloodline power in the world. If he were to borrow the skeletons of other magical beasts, the skeletons would probably shatter before he could do anything. The only one who could compete with it was the crimson gold heavenly phoenix, which had a completely different bloodline. It was even more impossible. It was also because of this that Mao Zhen did not have much hope in this matter. Rong Xiu said, "You forgot one thing. Zichen's body only fused with 2 wings. The rest of the skeleton is still in Yu Er's hands." Mao Zhen was shocked and looked at Chu Liwei. "You actually have a complete set of the great phoenix dragon skeleton." Chu Liwei coughed. Although she won this fair and square back then, Mao Zhen was still a great phoenix dragon. It felt a little strange to say this in front of him. But in the end she still forced herself to tell Mao Zhen what happened back then. To Chu Liue's surprise, Mao Zhen didn't fly into a rage after hearing this. Instead she sized Chu Liwei up in shock. "No wonder the crimson gold heavenly phoenix and the 3-eyed eagle contracted with you. Seems that you are really capable." Chu Liwei did not know whether to laugh or cry. She did not expect that Mao Zhen's focus would be on this after she said so much. "You're not angry?" Mao Zhen waved her hand. "What's there to be angry about? If you want to be angry you should be angry at Mao Yao." Anyone who was reasonable would know that it was Mao Yao's fault that this matter had blown up to this point. If it weren't for his carelessness, Chu Liwei wouldn't have been his match back then, much less win him. It was only because he was too proud and arrogant that he was tricked. No matter what, he was already so old and an elder of the clan. How could he be so brainless? Mao Zhen's attitude made Chu Liwei secretly relieved. In any case, Mao Zhen was much more reasonable and easier to communicate with than Mao Yao and Mao Yang. "You want me to use that skeleton?" Upon hearing this, Mao Zhen had already guessed Rong Xiu's plan. Rong Xiu nodded. "Although 2 wing bones are missing, the entire skeleton is still there. Although the bloodline power in it has almost been emptied, you still have a portion of bloodline power left in the mountain walls of 7 Lotus Peak. It just so happens that you can use it." In this way the major problems were basically solved. Of course, the level of this skeleton is definitely not comparable to your original body. After reconstructing your physical body, I'm afraid that your strength will be greatly reduced. Rong Xiu rationally and objectively analyzed the pros and cons of this matter, and clearly explained it to Mao Zhen. Generally speaking, there were pros and cons. However, this was already enough to shock Mao Zhen. He said that he had never thought of reconstructing his physical body, but how could he really not have thought of it at all? Even he himself didn't know how he had endured the long years he had been trapped in here. Loneliness, emptiness. He wanted to leave this place. He wanted to take revenge on Mao Yang. He wanted to take back everything that belonged to him. How proud he was in the past, how strong was his desire to go out. However, he knew better than anyone how slim this hope was. Thus, gradually his heart turned cold and he suppressed all these thoughts in the depths of his heart. Many times he felt that he was just a lonely soul, a lamp that had run out of oil at some point in time. Once he died, everything would be over. But, in the end, he was still unwilling. Therefore, at this moment when he heard Rong Xiu's words, he could not help but feel a storm in his heart. Endless joy surged up, almost drowning him. Even if his level was lower and his strength was weakened, so what? As long as he could reconstruct his physical body, he could completely leave this place. Everything that he once wanted, he would get it. What could be better than this? Mao Zhen took a deep breath, then said word by word, "If you can really help me reconstruct my physical body, then in the future if you need anything, as long as you ask, I, Mao Zhen, will do my best." Rong Xiu's thin scarlet lips curved into a perfect smile. "Deal." He did as he said. Chu Liwei took out the skeleton. The bloodline power inside had almost been completely extracted, so at this time even the bones were a little dim. Zichen stepped forward and flapped his wings. Whoosh! A fist-sized ball of blood appeared in front of him. Rong Xiu stood in front of the skeleton and raised his hand gently. A golden flame flew out and gently enveloped the ball of blood. Under the control of the flame, the ball of blood flew in front of him, which was also right in front of the skeleton's dragon head. Then Rong Xiu held his breath and focused his mind, then pointed his finger. Bang! With a loud explosion, the ball of blood instantly split open and transformed into countless sparks that flew toward the skeleton. The sparks burned and soon enveloped the entire skeleton. At the same time, the blood gradually merged with the skeleton. As time passed, the bloodline power contained in the blood also began to merge with the skeleton. The originally dim skeleton began to emit a lustrous light again. A faint pressure spread out from it. Chu Luiyue was secretly shocked by Rong Xiu's strength when he suddenly felt that something was wrong. He turned his head to look at Zichen, only to see spots of starlight flickering on its wings. More importantly, the aura on its body began to rise at an astonishing speed. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1757. Chu Luiyue was stunned. What was going on? Zichen seemed to be surprised as well. A hint of bewilderment flashed across the depths of his usually deep and indifferent eyes. Mao Zhen glanced over and was stunned at first. Then she laughed. I almost forgot about this. Your body has fused with the two wing bones of this skeleton. Although they have been separated, there is still a certain connection between them. Therefore, when the power of the skeleton begins to increase, the aura of your wing bones will also increase. Chu Luiyue blinked. She seemed to understand. In that case, if the power contained in the skeleton continues to increase, then Zichen's strength will also increase? Mao Zhen nodded. Theoretically speaking, that is indeed the case. However, the wing bones no longer belong to this skeleton, so the increase should be limited. Chu Luiyue sucked in a cold breath. She had guessed correctly. If that was really the case, then Zichen could be said to have picked up an enormous bargain. So what if the increase was limited? But in the end it still rose. Moreover, this skeleton would belong to Mao Zhen in the future. He was a great phoenix dragon. Moreover, he was a phoenix with top-notch talent and strength. Being able to benefit from his glory was something that many people could not even dream of. Now Zichen had encountered it. How could this not make her excited? Chu Luiyue looked at Zichen and saw a trace of emotion in his eyes. Of course, Zichen also knew that this was a rich and amazing surprise for him. Previously, he had rejected Mao Zhen's proposal because he had his own principles. However, even he had to admit that it was indeed a great loss for him. Although he did not regret his decision, there were always regrets. He never expected that in the end, because of the wing bones, he would be connected to Mao Zhen again. According to Mao Zhen, he could not only maintain his identity and bloodline, but also have a shortcut to become stronger. As long as Mao Zhen became stronger, his side would be affected and his own strength would increase as well. Was there anything better than this in the world? Mao Zhen sighed. That's why I said we were fated to meet. There was probably no other such thing in the world. Even if you don't want an opportunity bestowed by the heavens in the end, it will still fall into your hands through various means. Chu Luiyue was so shocked that he was speechless for a long time. Suddenly, Dumpling tugged at her sleeve. Chu Luiyue lowered his head to look at her. What's wrong, Dumpling? Dumpling bit her hand and looked at Zichen, then at Chu Luiyue. Is what you said just now true? Chu Luiyue couldn't help but laugh and gently pinch her chubby little face. Since Senior Mao Zhen said it himself, it's naturally true. Moreover, Zichen was her contracted magical beast, so she was the most sensitive to the changes in him. This was a foregone conclusion. Dumpling couldn't help but frown with a worried look. She stammered for a long time before saying, Then won't he be more powerful than me in the future? She scrunched up her little face and looked really worried. Chu Luiyue almost couldn't help laughing out loud. So you were thinking about this problem for a long time just now? Yes. Dumpling pouted. In the past she couldn't defeat Zichen. It was only when she became a crimson gold celestial phoenix that she finally won. Whether it was in terms of bloodline or strength, she was superior to Zichen. But now, Zichen's body had merged with the power of the great phoenix dragon's bloodline, and he had joined forces with Mao Zhen. In the future, with Mao Zhen's support, Zichen's strength would definitely improve by leaps and bounds. Then wouldn't she have no advantage at all? Chu Luiyue looked at her angry face and couldn't help laughing. He almost forgot that Dumpling and Zichen didn't have a good relationship. Apart from the critical moments when they were fighting the enemy together, the two of them basically didn't communicate much. Of course, it was usually Dumpling who was nagging about fighting and Zichen who ignored her. It was really annoyed by Tuanzi's noise that it took action without hesitation. But it didn't happen often. Now Dumpling and Zichen were almost evenly matched. If they really fought, it was hard to say who would win and who would lose. Actually, this is a very simple problem. If Zichen becomes stronger, you can also become stronger, right? Chu Luiyue said with a smile. Anyway, you're so talented. It should be very easy for you to do this, right? When Dumpling heard this, she felt that it made sense. That's right. If Xichen had become more powerful, then she only needed to become more powerful. No matter what, she had to be the one that you liked the most. Yes. I can definitely win. Hearing this, Xichen glanced over. Sensing its gaze, Dumpling clenched her small fists and raised her small face, looking as if she was ready to fight at any time. Zichen's eyes moved slightly. Then, without saying anything, it turned its head and closed its eyes. Its aura rose again. Dumpling was so angry that her teeth itched. Become stronger? Who didn't know how to? When she got out of here, she would definitely find Zichen and have a good fight. Time passed silently. The flames on the skeleton gradually subsided. The place where the flames disappeared had become as clear and moist as jade. Vaguely, a transparent liquid could be seen flowing slowly inside. That was the power of Mao Zhen's bloodline that had been contained in the blood bead. When the last cluster of golden flames disappeared, Rong Xiu looked up. Senior Mao Zhen, please. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1758. Mao Zhen took a deep breath and took a step forward. His illusory body formed by the white mist left the lake and walked to the top of the skeleton lying quietly by the lake. Without any hesitation, he entered the skeleton. The white mist spread and soon enveloped the skeleton. Rong Xiu took action at the same time. He shouted. Chu Luiyue immediately understood and took out many herbs from her Qian Kun ring. Boom. She threw out a reddish gold flame and quickly put the herbs into it. In a short while she had thrown in hundreds of herbs. If an ordinary person were to look at it like this, they would probably be dazzled and find it difficult to distinguish. However, Chu Luiyue's movements were smooth and straightforward. After a while, the herbs were refined one by one. A rich and slightly bitter medicinal aroma spread out from it. Helping Mao Zhen to reconstruct his body was an extremely long process. In this process, many herbs had to be added in at different times. To ensure that the process was foolproof, Rong Xiu was in charge of the refining of the skeleton and left the matter of the herbs to Chu Luiyue. Rong Xiu had already told her the herbs she needed. Fortunately, Chu Luiyue had all of them, so it was much more convenient. Purple beard vine Mingjue Wuyo fruit. When it was almost time, Rong Xiu gestured to Chu Luiyue to put in the herbs. Chu Luiyue waved her hand, and the 3 herbs that had already been refined in the fire quickly and lightly fell into the golden fire. Spirit severing herb. Blackhead herb. Heavenly pangolin. Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. They had always been in sync with each other, so their cooperation was perfect. Without Rong Xiu's detailed explanation, Chu Luiyue knew the different herbs and the steps to be refined. She could always put in the herbs at the most suitable time. Rong Xiu, on the other hand, had been staring at the skeleton in front of him since the beginning. He did not even raise his head. He knew that no one could do it better than her. Although the whole process was complicated and consumed a lot of energy and spirit, the two of them worked together and shared a lot of the burden. It was precisely because of this that things progressed more smoothly than expected. The aura of the skeleton continued to grow stronger. At the same time, the light on Zichen's wings shone even brighter. It closed its eyes. For some reason, every part of its body began to ache. At first it wasn't too obvious, but as time passed the pain became more and more obvious. Zichen knew very well that the pain wasn't because of any danger, nor was it a sign of trouble. It had a conjecture in its mind, but it felt that it was too absurd. Thus it just stood there, allowing the pain in its body to gradually increase until its body began to tremble slightly. Dumpling soon saw this scene. She had been thinking about how to prevent Zichen from overtaking her. Most of her attention was on it, so she quickly noticed that something was wrong with Zichen. She was taken aback and hurriedly ran over. You. What's wrong with you? Although she had always regarded Zichen as a rival and wanted to defeat it, she couldn't help but worry when she saw it like this. Zichen opened its eyes. I'm fine. Dumpling widened her eyes and looked it up and down. Fine. It doesn't look fine at all. Although Zichen's aura was still growing, it looked like it was in pain. I'm really fine. Seeing that Dumpling was still standing in front of it, Zichen repeated itself. This time it emphasized its tone. After all, Zichen had lived for thousands of years longer than Dumpling. It knew very well what to emphasize at this moment to make Dumpling calm down. Sure enough, Dumpling shrank its neck when it heard this. Then I'll stay here and watch you. Dumpling turned her head and glanced at Tu Liwei. Yu was at a critical juncture and couldn't be distracted. Something happened to Zichen, it would definitely affect her. Therefore, for Yu's sake, she had to make sure that Zichen was fine. Zichen glanced at her. He had always liked to go against it. Today's situation was rare. Dumpling felt a little strange being stared at. She immediately puffed out her chest and raised her head. What are you looking at? I'm still waiting for you to be my little brother. Zichen closed its eyes again. Some people really shouldn't have any illusions. The pain in its body was still increasing. But this time, Zichen's body didn't tremble anymore. It swallowed all the pain and torment it had to endure. On the surface, it seemed to be much better than before. Seeing this scene, Dumpling was relieved and began to wait patiently at the side. Bang! The door opened and a figure flew out. In the blink of an eye, it appeared in front of everyone. The people who had been waiting in the square for a long time were all excited because of this. The last one has finally come out. It's going to be a month soon. To be able to stay in there for so long, he must have obtained a top inheritance, right? I guess so. The first place of the Thousand Peak Summit. How enviable. Everyone was discussing animatedly, but they obviously had great hopes for the last young man to come out. Mao Yang stood up and took a few steps forward. Hearing the voice, Mao Su immediately cupped his fists and bowed respectfully to Mao Yang. Greetings, Patriarch. Mao Yang smiled and asked, no need to be so polite. You're the last one to come out of this Thousand Peak Summit. You did well. Hearing this, Mao Su straightened up with an undisguised high-spirited look on his face. Thank you for your praise, Patriarch. Seeing Zhou Xian's reaction, the crowd knew that their conjecture was correct. He must have obtained a very good inheritance. Mao Yang raised his leg and walked in front of Mao Su. Standing here, he could clearly feel that Mao Su's aura had indeed improved greatly. He nodded in satisfaction and patted Mao Su's shoulder. You're very good. He did not ask Mao Su which ancestor's inheritance he had obtained. This was the rule of the Thousand Peak Summit. Everyone would be able to make a rough guess based on the changes in their auras and from there determine their ranking. That was already enough. Unless they were willing to take the initiative to say, others could not ask. Therefore, although everyone was curious as to what kind of inheritance Mao Su had obtained, no one tactfully asked. Mao Yang praised him a few more times before saying, since everyone has come out, then the Thousand Peak Summit is considered to have ended successfully. Everyone cheered in unison. Mao Yang smiled and looked at the elders at the side. I'll have to trouble you to close the Great Void Temple with me. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1759. A few elders followed Mao Yang and walked forward. Mao Yang stood in front of the door. He held his breath and raised his arms. The power around him began to surge. A dazzling stream of light flew out from his fingertips. The other elders also attacked together. Soon numerous streams of light gathered. They formed a strange pattern in mid-air. It was the totem of the great Phoenix Dragon tribe. Seal. Mao Yang shouted and pushed the totem out. The huge and bright totem began to fly slowly toward the door. Soon the totem landed on the door. Buzz. A solemn and sacred buzzing sound came from the Great Void Temple. Everyone in the square bowed their heads in respect. However, at this moment, Mao Yang suddenly realized that something was wrong. The totem did not merge with the door. He frowned and secretly increased his power. However, the totem remained suspended an inch in front of the door and refused to move forward. It was as if there was an invisible barrier blocking the totem outside the door. Mao Yang felt uneasy. Such a situation had never happened before. Soon the other elders also noticed this strange scene and frowned. What's going on? The door of the Great Void Temple can't be closed? In the past, we've worked together to close the door. This has never happened before. What's going on this time? Could it be someone hasn't come out yet? The words of a white-haired elder attracted everyone's attention and made Mao Yang's heart skip a beat. He turned his head to look at the elder. Elder Fushan, what do you mean by this? Elder Fushan was an elder in the tribe and his seniority was much higher than Mao Yang's. He was a highly respected elder in the Great Phoenix Dragon tribe. There's only one possibility for the Great Void Temple's door to refuse to close. There's still someone inside. There had been a similar situation in the past. The door wouldn't close no matter how hard they tried. Later, when they investigated, they found out that they had missed a person inside. It wasn't until a few days later when that person walked out that everything was completed smoothly. Mao Fushan stroked his beard. In my opinion, why don't we check in this direction? Mao Yang heaved a sigh of relief and turned to give instructions. Check the people who came out earlier again. The people below quickly agreed. Yes. However, some elders were still frowning. Because they clearly remembered that everyone had already come out, and Mao Su was indeed the last one. Logically speaking, there should be no one left in the Great Void Temple. Not long after, those who had entered the Great Void Temple were all gathered and counted by the two elders. However, after checking, they found that the number of people was indeed correct. Clan head, everyone who has entered the Great Void Temple is already here at the Thousand Peak Summit. No one was left out. The elder in charge of counting the number of people braced himself and said. Everyone's expression changed. Even Mao Yang's heart sank. He suddenly raised his eyes and looked at the Great Void Temple again. There was someone else inside, but he didn't know about it. By the lake. The forest was shady, the water rippled, and everything was tranquil. Chu Luiyue raised his wrist and sent out the last medicinal ingredient. A handful of crimson-red sand lightly fell into the burning golden flame beside him. Boom. The flame burned even more fiercely. Vaguely, one could already see that the bones were gradually growing muscles and flesh. Although Chu Luiyue had previously helped Zichen reconstruct his physical body, he was still shocked when he saw Zhou Xian make a move. At that time, Zichen had only borrowed 2 wing bones of the Great Void Phoenix Dragon, and she had almost exhausted all her strength. Now what Zhou Xian wanted to reconstruct was the real Great Void Phoenix Dragon. Zhou Xian's expression was calm. The golden flame was reflected in his eyes, and the fire was burning brightly. The effects of all the medicinal ingredients had gradually seeped into the skeleton. The rich and slightly bitter medicinal fragrance was mixed with a faint smell of blood. After an unknown period of time, a purple-gold phosphorescent light flashed through the flame. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. That was the scales of the Great Void Phoenix Dragon. Had he finally reached the final stage? Almost at the same time, Chu Luiyue heard a scream behind him. Screech, she was shocked and immediately looked back. However, she was shocked to see that a purple-gold light had torn apart Zichen's wings and broken out of his body. Then it enveloped his entire body. Zichen. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. She could feel that Zichen was in great pain at this moment. However, she could not stop him. Dumpling was also shocked by this scene. Her eyes widened in a daze. What happened just now? Zichen's wings, she subconsciously looked at Chu Luiyue. Are you? He's fine. Chu Luiyue pulled Dumpling over, patted her head and comforted her softly. He'll be fine in a while. Hearing Lin Mingya's firm tone, Tuanzi's beating heart finally settled down. When she saw that scene just now, it really gave her a fright. Chu Luiyue touched her face and smiled. Dumpling, I didn't expect you to care so much about Zichen. Only then did Tuanzi remember her position and immediately said, of course. If something happened to him, wouldn't you be very sad? Besides, I'm still waiting to be his big sister. Chu Luiyue's heart was filled with warmth. Dumpling was lively and pure. Although she liked to put on a brave front, she was always very kind to her people. Usually she liked to cause trouble for Zichen. However, when it mattered, she still cared about Zichen. However, it would be a little difficult for her to be Zichen's big sister. Chu Luiyue's eyes turned slightly and looked at Zichen again, who was enveloped by the purple-gold light. Although the process was painful, as long as he could get through this, Zichen. Boom. A loud sound actually came from the sky. An extremely dangerous aura was rapidly approaching. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat and she looked up. However, he heard a deep and fierce voice coming from afar. Who dares to trespass into the Temple of the Void? Come out. Chu Luiyue frowned. Mao Yang. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1760. Mao Yang's figure did not appear. Chu Luiyue remembered clearly that Mao Zhen had said that the Great Phoenix Dragon tribe usually only had one chance to enter this place in their lifetime. Obviously, Mao Yang could not enter. But even so, Mao Yang should be waiting outside the Great Void Temple with his people. He wanted to force them out. Chu Liyue turned around to take a look. Everything had reached the final stage. It was the most crucial moment. Rong Xiu could not be distracted. They had to continue to stay here until Mao Zhen's body was officially completed. Boom. Another sound was heard. It was so loud that it numbed everyone. It was as if someone was holding a giant hammer and hammering it from the outside. Do you really think that you can hide here forever? Come out. Mao Yang's voice was no longer as gentle as usual. Instead, it was filled with ferocity and madness. Chu Liyue looked at the sky and sneered. Someone had quietly entered the Great Void Temple and even the coiling dragon pillar. This was no different from slapping Mao Yang, the tribe leader, hard in the face. It was expected that he would be so flustered and exasperated. Of course they would go out, but not now. Chu Liyue raised his hand. Countless silver-red stars flew out like a river of stars and spread out. Soon the few people within the radius, including the lake, were enveloped in Chu Liyue's god territory. The commotion outside was instantly isolated. Chu Liyue began to wait calmly. The Great Void Temple's door was locked. There was dead silence in the main hall. A few people stood in front of the coiling dragon pillar. At the front was Mao Yang, whose face was extremely ugly. Standing behind him in a row were the elders of the clan. Other than a few elders who stayed outside to calm the crowd, the rest of the elders who participated in the Thousand Summit had all arrived. It was a matter of great importance. They had to come. Everyone fell into a deathly silence as they looked at the few specks of light floating on the coiling dragon pillar. The air seemed to have frozen. Mao Yang clenched his fists. He was so angry that his lungs almost exploded. It turned out that not only did someone sneak in, there was more than one person. This was simply tearing his face and dignity to shreds and ruthlessly trampling on the ground. How are you guys guarding the Great Void Temple? How can you not know when someone came in? He turned around and yelled at the elders. The elders looked at each other in dismay as cold sweat broke out all over their bodies. Mao Yang rarely got angry. Even when Mao Yao made such a big mistake and caused the ancestors' bones to be unable to be returned to the clan, he didn't do anything to Mao Yao. This time it was obvious that he had used his true energy. In the silence, Miao Fushan spoke up. Patriarch, we haven't found out how this happened yet. I'm afraid it's not appropriate to convict him at this time. Mao Yang closed his eyes and tried his best to suppress the anger in his heart. Elder Fushan, I know what you mean. However, the Great Void Temple is the most sacred and important place in our tribe. Now that something like this has happened, it is precisely because it happened in the Great Void Temple that the clan leader has to remain calm. Miao Fushan advised patiently. The Great Void Temple has always been guarded very strictly. After the Millennium Summit began, everyone was even more vigilant and didn't dare to relax. Moreover, from the beginning to the end, all of us were in the square and no one noticed this. It's clear that the other party came prepared and moved very stealthily, deceiving all of us. Mao Yang was also there. He didn't notice anything either. If not for the fact that they couldn't close the door in the end, who knew when they would have found out about this? Therefore, this couldn't be blamed on the elders. Mao Yang took a deep breath. Miao Fushan's words were reasonable. Moreover, he was very senior, so Mao Yang naturally had to be more polite. If he ordered Miao Fushan around like this, he would really be crazy. You're right. I was impulsive. Miao Fushan shook his head. Patriarch is also worried about the clan. Mao Yang looked at the coiling dragon pillar again and frowned. Who the hell are these people? Where did they come from? After realizing that something was wrong, they quickly came in and checked almost the entire Great Void Temple. There was nothing strange. Everything was exactly the same as when they first arrived. Patriarch, could it be that someone tore through space and came here? Miao Fushan pondered for a moment and asked. Mao Yang nodded thoughtfully. This was the most likely possibility. Moreover, I have a feeling that the people who came in aren't from the clan. Miao Fushan pointed at the stars on the coiling dragon pillar. Look, this color is really wrong. When the Great Void Phoenix Dragon clansmen entered the coiling dragon pillar, they all appeared the same color. However, these people had different colors and were completely different from them. Mao Yang's eyelids twitched violently. If they weren't from the clan, then they were outsiders. But Divine Dragon Island was heavily guarded and didn't allow anyone to enter easily. How? No. Mao Yang suddenly thought of something and his expression changed abruptly. Rong Xiao and Shangguan Yu were also on Divine Dragon Island. He immediately said, "Quick, go and check 7 Lotus Peak. See if those two are still there." The elders looked at each other in surprise, and then they quickly understood what was going on. Did the patriarch mean that the two of them were suspicious? "Yes. I'll go now." One of the elders nodded and turned to leave. However, after taking 2 steps, Mao Yang followed with a gloomy expression. "Forget it. I'll go personally." He really didn't feel at ease letting others go to 7 Lotus Peak. "Elder Fushan, I'll leave this place to you for now." Mao Fushan nodded. Given the current situation, it might really be those 2 people. It would be good for the patriarch to go personally. Mao Yang strode away and disappeared quickly. 7 Lotus Peak. It was quiet and everything was as usual. One of the guards craned his neck and looked in the direction of the Temple of the Void. He asked curiously, "Didn't the last person come out just now? Why is there no movement now?" Logically speaking, everyone should have left after the 1000 Summit ended. However, it had been a while but it was still quiet. The other guard said, "Maybe there are other things that haven't been settled? After all, the 1000 Summit is only held once in so many years." Before he finished speaking, the two of them saw a figure flying toward them from afar. The aura was awe-inspiring and imposing. It was actually, "Greetings, Patriarch." Seeing the face of the person who came, the 2 guards were shocked and hurriedly bowed. Mao Yang's face seemed to be covered with a layer of ice. "Where are Rong Xiao and Shangguan Yu?" The 2 of them were stunned. They're still inside." Mao Yang knew that it was meaningless to continue asking. He waved his sleeves, opened the barrier and flashed in. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1761. He was so fast that he disappeared in front of the 2 guards in the blink of an eye. What's going on?" The 2 people who were left behind were at a loss. One of the guards asked, "Why is the patriarch here all of a sudden? And he doesn't look well." He had never seen the patriarch so angry before. Could it be that the 2 of them are getting impatient because they haven't made a move for so long? The other guard frowned and suddenly realized something. Oh no. Something's happened at 7 Lotus Peak. At that moment he did not care about anything else. He moved his feet and chased after Mao Yang. The remaining guards hurriedly followed after him. "Hey, what's going on? Wait for me." Mao Yang arrived at 7 Lotus Peak and went straight to the cave halfway up the mountain. As soon as he arrived at the entrance of the cave and saw the burn marks on the edges, his eyelids twitched violently. He quickly walked in. When the 2 guards arrived, Mao Yang's figure had already disappeared from the cave. The 2 guards looked at each other but did not dare to step in. They could only wait outside in torment. The guard, who was still a little confused at first, vaguely realized that something very serious must have happened. His face was pale and his voice trembled. "What could have happened? During this period of time, we have been diligently guarding this place, day and night without rest. If there was really an accident, we should have noticed it at all." The other guard did not say anything, but there was a hint of panic and fear in his eyes. The patriarch's reaction was too obvious. If anything happened, they, as guards, would be the first to bear the brunt of it. At this time seemed to be particularly unbearable. After an unknown period of time, Mao Yang finally walked out of the cave. Seeing his current expression, the 2 guards' hearts sank. Mao Yang put his hands behind his back and looked coldly at the 2 guards. "Where are they?" he asked. Hearing this, the 2 guards were confused. What does this mean? They're gone? Rong Xiao and Shangguan Yu escaped? Mao Yang finally could not hold back and shouted, "I'm asking you, where are they?" This finally brought them back to their senses. Plop. The 2 of them knelt down together. "Patriarch, we really don't know what happened. If they noticed anything, how could they not report it?" Mao Yang gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. Of course, he knew that the 2 of them didn't know anything. But this was what infuriated him the most. They were definitely the ones who had snuck into the Great Void Temple. These 2 people had actually toyed with their entire clan in the palm of their hands. The 2 guards were trembling all over. It was obvious that after making such a huge mistake, even if they didn't die, they would lose a layer of skin. "During this period of time, you really didn't notice anything wrong?" Mao Yang asked, unwilling to give up. One of the guards suddenly remembered something. Oh right. A few days ago, there seemed to have been a faint fluctuation in Seven Lotus Mountain. However, because the commotion was very small and disappeared very quickly, we only thought that it was the two of them causing trouble and didn't take it to heart. His voice became softer and softer as a deep sense of despair filled his heart. At this moment, even they themselves realized that it was a huge mistake on their part. Just because of a moment of carelessness, those two escaped. This was irrefutable. Mao Yang was so angry that he laughed. Now it seemed that the commotion was really caused by those two. It was very likely that they had already escaped from Seven Lotus Mountain and went to the Great Void Temple. Mao Yang looked at the two of them coldly. There seemed to be a fire burning in his chest, almost driving him crazy. The two of them also sensed the danger and were about to speak. Clan, Chi. Mao Yang raised his hand and a light blade flew out. It directly pierced through one of the guards' chest. Poof! Bright red blood quickly gushed out from his chest. As for himself, his eyes were bulging out of their sockets. There was deep fear in his eyes. He was already dead. When the other person saw this scene, he was shocked to the core. The Great Void Phoenix Dragon clan was not allowed to casually kill their own clan members. Even if they committed a grave mistake and needed to be executed, they had to go through the trial of the elders. Why did the clan leader directly kill them? He looked at Mao Yang and suddenly realized that the clan leader's usually gentle face had become crazy and ferocious at this moment. He knew that this was not good and turned to run. However, just as he took a step, the light blade quickly attacked from behind. It directly cut him in half at the waist. He immediately stopped in his tracks. After a short stalemate, his body fell heavily to the ground and stopped breathing. In the blink of an eye, the two of them were killed by Mao Yang. Mao Yang's expression was cold. With a flick of his sleeve, the two corpses quickly burned. In the blink of an eye, the two corpses turned into ashes and scattered with the wind. Even the bloodstains on the ground were burned to ashes. Mao Yang looked back and a trace of haze flashed in his eyes. Then he moved his feet and instantly disappeared from the spot. Great Void Temple. In the main hall, everyone was waiting in silence. After some time, the door opened and Mao Yang walked in again. He walked hurriedly, his expression was cold and his body seemed to be wrapped in frost. Seeing his expression, everyone's heart sank. Mao Fushan frowned, stepped forward and asked, "Clan leader, how is the situation?" Mao Yang stood in front of the coiling dragon pillar with a cold smile. The Rong Xiu duo had already secretly left Seven Lotus Peak a long time ago. The ones inside must be them. The atmosphere in the main hall became even more tense. Seven Lotus Peak is heavily guarded. How did the guards do it? Mao Yang's expression was indifferent. They have already committed suicide to atone for their crimes. All of the elders were shocked. The members of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan were all very proud. To them, committing suicide was not something to be proud of. Therefore, almost no one would choose to end their own lives in this way. Mao Fushan was also stunned. Then, where are their corpses? Mao Yang sighed. They died of self-mutilation and did not leave behind a skeleton. Several elders gasped in shock. Mao Fushan's old face twitched and he finally sighed. What a pity. Although this is serious, it is not to this extent. Not even a skeleton was left behind. Their names would be erased from the clan records. They would not even be able to think about it in the future. This could definitely be considered as the most tragic punishment. Mao Yang looked down. At that time I was thinking about Rong Xiu and didn't pay attention, so, forget it. What's done is done. Mao Fushan turned around and looked at the coiling dragon pillar. The most important thing now is to get them out of here. Mao Yang nodded. I will do it myself. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1762. As he spoke, he walked up to the coiling dragon pillar and raised his right hand. Purplish gold scales quickly appeared and covered the back of his hand. The scales were sharp and reflected a cold light. Then he clenched his fist and punched out. Boom! The tyrannical force slammed into the coiling dragon pillar. Kaboom! Another loud sound came from the sky. Chu Luiyue looked up. The commotion had stopped for a while. She thought that Mao Yang and the others must have discovered something. As expected, Mao Yang's voice came. Rong Xiu, Kangguan Yu, how dare you? Chu Luiyue smirked. She knew that this matter would not be kept a secret for long. Mao Yang was not stupid. He would understand everything if he went to the 7 Lotus Peaks. However, they could not go out yet. He looked around. Mao Zhen's body had mostly recovered. She estimated that it would take some time for it to be fully healed. Before that, she had to make sure that Wuxia would not be affected by the outside world. Otherwise, it would be a big loss if everything went to waste. Chu Liwei held her breath and strengthened the divine territory around her. In the Taishu temple, Mao Yang looked at the unresponsive coiling dragon pillar. The anger in his heart was about to burst out of his chest. His eyes were dyed with a trace of blood. Patriarch, it seems that they are determined to stay inside. Mao Fushan shook his head. We are outside and they are inside. Unless they come out of their own accord, it will be difficult for us to force them out. The coiling dragon pillar contained the power of their ancestors. It was sacred and unshakable. Even if everyone here worked together, they would not be able to do anything. In the current situation, they could only wait. Mao Yang did not say anything. Another elder said in a low voice, Strange. The 2 of them are humans. Logically speaking, they shouldn't even be able to enter this hall. How did they manage to enter the coiling dragon pillar without anyone noticing? His question immediately attracted the attention of others. That's right. Aren't we the only ones who can enter here? It is not easy for our own people to enter the coiling dragon pillar, let alone humans. How did they do it? Let's not talk about anything else. These 2 people are really strange. Mao Yang sneered. Isn't it simple? Don't forget that Shangguan Yu has an ancestor skeleton. As for the legendary 3-eyed eagle, it had even used its bones to reconstruct its body. With this layer of relationship, what was so strange about them being able to enter the coiling dragon pillar? Everyone was silent. They had underestimated the strength of those 2 people and thought that as long as they locked them up, everything would be fine. Who would have thought that they had such a skill? Mao Fushan asked. Patriarch? If they were to continue waiting like this, it would be too depressing. Who knew when they would come out? Mao Yang closed his eyes. Formation. Miao Fushan and the others' expressions changed. The formation was one of the top formations of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. It required more than 10 elders to work together. Under normal circumstances, they would not easily activate the demon-slaying formation. Mao Fushan hesitated. Patriarch, the formation consumes a lot of energy. The 1000 Summit just ended. Wouldn't it be inappropriate to activate it now? Mao Yang asked. Elder Fushan, do you have a better idea? Now that they have entered the coiling dragon pillar, no one knows what they will do. If things get out of hand. Mao Fushan fell into deep thought. Mao Yang's words were reasonable. Something like this had never happened in the clan. They had to be on high alert. It was better to be safe than sorry. Then we will do as Patriarch says. Mao Fushan nodded. Then the elders spread out and formed a circle with the coiling dragon pillar as the center. Condense. Mao Yang took the lead. A purple gold light flew out of his palm. At the same time, a totem flashed between his eyebrows. The other elders also followed closely behind him. In an instant, several rays of light flew up and landed on the coiling dragon pillar. A rich purple-gold color quickly spread out on the white jade coiling dragon pillar. The dragon carving on it gradually lit up. A vast aura gradually spread out in all directions. Mao Yang shouted. Formation, activate. After a few sounds came from the sky, it disappeared again. This time even Mao Yang's voice did not sound. Chu Liwei raised her hand slightly, looked at the sky and frowned slightly. Did Mao Yang stop? Of course not. They had stepped on Mao Yang's bottom line this time. It was equivalent to giving him a heavy slap in the face. How could he give up so easily? Perhaps because they couldn't come in, they decided to wait outside? When they get out of here, Mao Yang and the others will make a move. Just as this thought flashed through her mind, Chu Liwei suddenly felt that something was wrong. A strange sound came from behind her. She looked back. The sound seemed to come from the depths of the forest. However, the lush forest blocked her vision, so she could not see clearly what was happening. However, the sound was getting closer and closer. Gradually, Chu Liwei distinguished that it seemed to be the sound of trees falling. At this moment, she finally saw a shadow spreading from the distance. Under the thick shadow, the thick and lush towering trees fell one after another. Bang! A tree fell down with a loud bang. Leaves flew and the ground shook. Chu Liwei was shocked. This power is boom boom boom. The same sound came from her right. Chu Liwei quickly scanned her surroundings and instantly sucked in a cold breath. The shadow was coming from all directions and surrounded them. A biting cold pressure and killing intent came over from all directions. Chu Liwei instantly understood something. Mao Yang and the others had made a move after all. Even if they could not enter here, they still had other means to deal with them. Chu Liwei looked at Rong Xiu. In front of him, Mao Zhen's body was almost complete. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1763. Chu Liwei made a prompt decision and looked at Dumpling. Dumpling had a tacit understanding with her and immediately nodded with a determined expression. Then she took a step forward and waved her hand. Reddish-gold flames instantly rose. They formed a circle around everyone. The trees were still collapsing and the layer of black shadow continued to push forward, destroying everything in its path. Only then did Chu Liwei see clearly that it was a purplish-black fog with faint golden stars within. An indescribable sense of oppression came from all directions. Soon the purplish-black fog collided with the reddish-gold flames. Boom! The two forces collided and intertwined. In an instant sparks flew everywhere. Dumpling's face turned pale. This demon-slaying formation gathered the power of several great phoenix dragon elders, so Dumpling was naturally not its match. Chu Liwei mobilized the force in her body and injected it, causing the flames to surge. The purplish-black fog finally stopped, and the two sides entered a stalemate. Chu Liu's heart was in her mouth. She and Dumpling were probably not this thing's match. They might barely be able to hold on for a while, but it was impossible for them to last longer. She didn't know if they could wait until Mao Zhen's body was completely reconstructed. At this moment, the purplish-black fog seemed to have sensed the obstruction in front of it and rapidly condensed. Chu Liwei narrowed her eyes and saw that the fog had formed Mao Yang's appearance. His appearance and figure were exactly the same as the real Mao Yang. However, his eyes were empty as if he was a stiff puppet. He opened his mouth and the voice that came out was also Mao Yang's threatening voice. Rong Xiu Shangguanyu, do you really want to go against my great phoenix dragon race to the end? This voice was very gloomy, completely different from when he first saw them. It could be seen that Mao Yang had completely lost his patience and had a strong killing intent towards them. Chu Liwei didn't care about this. From the very beginning, Mao Yang had never thought of having a good talk with them. He had always been high and mighty, never putting them in his eyes. From then on, Chu Liwei knew that Mao Yang harbored deep enmity towards them. Now it was just that he could no longer pretend. Chu Liwei smiled. Patriarch Mao Yang, we were just bored at Seven Lotus Mountain and came out to take a look. Why are you in such a hurry? When we've had enough fun, we'll naturally go out. Chu Liu's voice rang out clearly from the coiling dragon pillar, echoing throughout the hall. Mao Yang's face darkened. Did he get bored and come out to have a look? What kind of place did they think this was? That they could come and go as they pleased? This Shangguanyu was just like what Mao Yao had said. She was arrogant to the extreme. Mao Yang was so angry that he laughed. Good. Since you want to play, then this patriarch will accompany you to the end. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly sat down on the ground and closed his eyes. A totem flashed between his eyebrows. At the same time, the same totem flashed between the eyebrows of the puppet inside the coiling dragon pillar that looked exactly like Mao Yang. An extremely dangerous aura emanated from its body. Chu Liu's heart skipped a beat. Then he saw the puppet stomp heavily on the ground and charge towards them. Without hesitation, Chu Liu flew out and chose to fight with it. A sharp sound pierced through the air. The bright and sharp crimson heaven sword had already appeared in her hand. In the next instant, she charged out of the boundary formed by the red-gold flames and the silver-red divine domain. Ayu! Tuanzi shouted worriedly, and her little face was full of worry. Chu Liu did not turn around and only shouted. Dumpling, take care of the boundary. Leave the rest to her. Although Dumpling was worried, she could not help but nod. The flames in her eyes burned even more fiercely. On the other side, Chu Liu and the puppet were already engaged in close combat. Crimson Heaven Sword. Chu Liu held the sword with both hands and quickly slashed it down. The puppet raised its arm and purplish gold dragon scales gradually appeared on its arm. They were hard and dazzling. Clang. The blade of the sword landed on the dragon's armor with a crisp sound. Crack. A thin crack appeared on the dragon's armor. However, the puppet's expression did not change. In the next instant, purplish-black mist covered the crack, and in the blink of an eye, it was restored to its original state. Chu Liu's pupils shrank. The puppet's recovery ability was heaven-defying. Mao Yang's voice came from the puppet's mouth. It was sinister, cold, and filled with undisguised mockery. A mere high god is indeed extraordinary to be able to use a supremacy divine artifact. However, this is the best you can do. Even a true supremacy expert would not be a match for him, let alone Shangguanyu, who was of an even lower level. Then the puppet bent its elbow and struck. The sharp and tough armor drew a cold and short arc in the air. Chu Liwei blocked with his sword. Buzz. A force as heavy as a mountain came crashing down. Chu Liu's chest tightened, and the thick smell of blood instantly spread between his lips and teeth. The cultivation of the great phoenix dragon race was very different from that of the human race. When they devoured the energy of heaven and earth, most of it would fuse into their bones and blood vessels. As a result, their physical strength was usually extremely strong. Therefore, human puppets might be unable to use their original force, resulting in a decrease in their combat strength. However, the great phoenix dragon did not have such concerns at all. For example, although this puppet was not as strong as the Real Mao Yang, it was not much weaker. Especially this puppet, which had gathered the strength of all the elders. Naturally, it was stronger. Chu Liuyue's physical combat skills were considered top-notch among cultivators who were also high gods. However, the puppet's attack could still easily injure her. She swallowed the sweet taste between her lips and teeth and passed Scarlet Cloud Sword to her right hand. A black shield appeared in her left hand. Just as she summoned the black shield, the puppet's second punch had already landed. Buzz. The sound of the collision was extremely dull. Chu Liuyue's wrist instantly went numb, but fortunately she managed to block the power of the punch. Her feet had sunk deeply into the ground when she stepped on it. You have a lot of trump cards, but unfortunately your strength is not enough. These tricks are meaningless. The puppet closed in on Chu Liuyue and swiftly landed another punch. The shocking force was greatly reduced by the black shield, but part of it still landed on Chu Liuyue's body. Chu Liuyue's body flew out uncontrollably. She flipped her palm and stabbed her sword into the ground. Whoosh! Scarlet Cloud Sword drew a deep trench in the ground. Relying on this resistance, Chu Liuyue managed to stabilize her body with great difficulty. However, before she could catch her breath, the puppet had already attacked again. Buzz. Several scales flew out from his body and instantly surrounded Chu Liuyue. The sharp whistling sound made one's eardrums vibrate. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1764. Chu Liuyue suddenly raised his head and was almost dazzled by the scene in front of him. Without hesitation, she immediately placed the black shield in front of her, completely concealing her figure. Clang clang clang. An ear-piercing sound of impact was heard, and dark red blood slowly seeped out from the corner of Chu Liuyue's mouth. This can't go on, Chu Liuyue thought. Shangguanyu, you are no match for me. If you come out now, kneel down and beg for mercy, my great phoenix dragon tribe might leave you with a complete corpse. Mao Yang coldly shouted. Chu Liuyue's lips curled into a bloodthirsty and mocking arc. He hadn't won yet. His tone was too arrogant. She closed her eyes as countless thoughts flashed through her mind. Her hand tightly gripped the hilt of Scarlet Heaven Sword. The patterns on it were almost imprinted on her palm. It was indeed impossible for this to go on. She licked her lips. The sticky, sweet, and fishy taste was even more pungent. Although it was only a puppet, it was Mao Yang's puppet. If she wanted to win, all her previous tricks would not work. I have to think of another way. Chu Liuyue stayed behind the black shield, which made Mao Yang angry and contemptuous. This item from Shangguanyu is indeed extraordinary. However, even if she could hide for a while, could she keep hiding like this forever? Born from the demon-slaying formation and infused with the strength of the elders, the puppets possessed incredible fighting prowess. Even if they were injured, they would feel no pain and would be able to recover swiftly. He was in an invincible position. Shangguanyu, what can I use to fight him? Inside the main hall, the totem on Mao Yang's forehead glowed even brighter. The aura surrounding his body was extremely shocking. When the elders saw this, they secretly exchanged glances with each other. They all understood that the patriarch was truly angry this time. He was determined to take the lives of those two. You don't know what's good for you. The puppet coldly spat out these words. There was no expression on his face and his eyes were empty. However, Chu Liwei could still hear the endless sarcasm and contempt in his tone. He walked forward, his entire body filled with killing intent. To Mao Yang, Chu Liwei was just an ant at this moment. He could easily kill her with a finger. Therefore he did not take Chu Liwei seriously at all. If you agreed to wipe your memories from the beginning, how would today's situation? Mao Yang had always thought of humans. This was especially true for Rong Xiao and the other two. Chu Liwei closed her eyes. I know your identity is not ordinary. Princess consort of Yun Tianke, the direct disciple of the principal of the Spirit Firmament Academy. In the entire Divine Ruins world, there were very few people who dared to provoke you. Of you, I. The two ancient of the ancient heaven had always. They were fearless and dared to do things that others did not dare to do. Moreover, this time it was Rong Xiao and Shangguanyu who made the mistake. In the future, even if the Yuntian Tower and Lingxiao College wanted to cause trouble for them, they would not have a valid reason to do so. Therefore he had to kill these two people in the next few days. As the puppet walked forward step by step, cracks appeared on the ground. A purplish-black mist spread out. Dumpling looked over anxiously. Her heart was clenched tightly. She wanted to go forward, but she remembered Chu Liu's instructions. She could only stay where she was and support the barrier around her. Finally, the puppet stopped 3 steps away from Chu Liu. He reached out and clenched his fist. The black shield was instantly sent flying. Just like that, Chu Liu was completely exposed to the other party. She did not run away. Instead, she sat cross-legged with her eyes closed. The blood at the corner of her mouth was red and mournful. It made her face look even paler. The situation did not look good. The puppet was expressionless. He flipped his wrist. A purplish gold whip suddenly appeared in his hand. The shape of the whip was very strange. It was formed by layers of scales. At a glance, it looked like the great phoenix dragon's tail. Die! Mao Yang shouted and lashed out with the whip. It went straight for Chu Liu. Wherever the whip passed, the space trembled violently. It was as if it was about to collapse. The strands of hair in front of Chu Liu's forehead flew up with the wind. She did not seem to sense the impending danger and remained motionless. In the blink of an eye, the whip was in front of her and was about to land on her body. If the whip landed, she would be crippled even if she did not die. Ah, you! Dumpling widened her eyes and wanted to rush over. Rong Xiu's palm moved slightly and black flames burned in his eyes. However, at this moment the sound of a zither suddenly rang out. The sound of the zither was desolate and clanging. Just this sound alone made people feel as if they were in a sea of blood. It was as if an overwhelming killing intent from ancient times had enveloped the entire world. Dumpling retracted the step she had just taken. She widened her grape-like eyes and looked at Chu Liu in shock. The thin woman was sitting cross-legged with a straight posture. Her black hair hung down, making her look even thinner. Her face was very pale, as if she would collapse at any moment. However, the pair of eyes that suddenly opened were bright and clear. Her fighting spirit was awe-inspiring. A vast aura that could not be looked down upon quickly spread from her body. At this moment she raised her hands with her palms facing down. Her jade-like fingertips gently plucked the air, and the sound of the zither rang out again. An inch-long reddish-gold light blade flew out from her hands. The purplish-gold whip was instantly cut in half. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1765. Inside the Taishu Temple, Mao Yang's body trembled as he opened his eyes. They were filled with shock and horror. How is this possible? At the same time, the other elders in the temple also suffered from the backlash of the attack. Their expressions changed as they looked at the coiling dragon pillar in disbelief. Did Shangguanyu just block the attack of the demon-slaying formation? Isn't she a high god? Wasn't she about to lose just now? What was going on with the current situation? Mao Fushan furrowed his brows. Did you hear something just now? Everyone fell silent for a moment. Then someone asked with uncertainty, "What do you mean?" It sounded like the sound of a zither. Mao Fushan nodded solemnly. That's right. It was indeed the sound of a zither. The sound of the zither contained a shocking amount of power. It's definitely not something a high god like Shangguan can possess. I don't know what kind of method she used to actually find such a helper. Even if it wasn't her own power, she could still contend against them if she used it. To be able to resist the demon-slaying formation, even a high god can't do that. Everyone's hearts were filled with shock. Mao Yang gritted his teeth. She's so cunning at such a young age. She has so many tricks up her sleeve. He had underestimated Shangguan. No wonder she was so arrogant before. She had such a trump card. Patriarch, what do you think we should do next? Mao Fushan's face was tinged with worry. Although the demon-slaying formation is very powerful, it's still inside the coiling dragon pillar. It's suppressed by the ancestral power. The demon-slaying formation can't be fully unleashed. If Shangguan can continue to rely on this power, it'll be difficult for us to kill her. Although it was unpleasant to hear, it was the truth. Mao Yang was furious. He hated that he didn't kill the two of them immediately. If he had dealt with the two of them back then, they wouldn't have had to deal with so many problems. But now it was useless to say anything. There were only two choices in front of them. First, they could use more forceful means to force the two of them out. Second, they could wait here patiently. They wouldn't stay here forever. They could attack when they came out. But Mao Yang didn't want to choose the second option. The Great Phoenix Dragon Tribe was being played by two humans. They even dared to act so brazenly in the Great Void Temple. If news of this got out, their tribe's reputation would be tarnished. Mao Yang, would definitely become the laughingstock of the entire Divine Ruins world in the future. Continue. Mao Yang's eyes were filled with madness. A stream of light flashed in his hand, and a piece of sharp scale armor appeared in an instant. He didn't hesitate with the dragon's cut. Crimson-red beads of blood, Patriarch? The elders present were all shocked. Patriarch's bloods. Dragon with the dragon you able you. It yangs it, Mao you. Ever since he became the patriarch, he had never officially used a blood sacrifice in the past few hundred years. Mao Yang was determined. The blood in his palm quickly condensed into a blood bead and flew toward the coiling dragon pillar. The blood bead disappeared into the coiling dragon pillar under everyone's watchful eyes. A layer of faint blood-red color gradually spread out. Looking at the broken whip, Chu Liuyue's eyes lit up as if stars were shining in them. He did it. She only wanted to give it a try. Who knew she could do it? Ayu, you're so powerful. Dumpling regained her senses and couldn't help but shout. Her pale face was flushed with excitement. Chu Liuyue's lips curved up slightly as she heaved a sigh of relief in her heart. Just now, when she was hiding behind the black shield, she had actually thought a lot. She knew that she couldn't keep hiding. She had to think of a way to stop the other party's attack and buy more time for Rong Xiao and the others. As a high god, her strength was limited. It was unrealistic to rely on her own strength to win. So she chose to borrow strength. She borrowed the strength of the water bead in her dantian. Ever since she merged the two pieces of the music score, it had returned to its original appearance as a round and clear water bead. It floated quietly in Chu Liuyue's dantian. She remembered that Senior Ajing had used that song to unleash his power in the God-slaying mound. Since she had 2/3 of the music score and was familiar with the song, why couldn't she give it a try? To others, she was just sitting there with her eyes closed as if she was about to give up. In reality, she was just thinking about the song. She didn't have a guqin in her hand. But when she thought about it, the water bead in her dantian reacted immediately. Vigorous force surged out and spread through her limbs and bones. Finally, it flowed out from her palm. She felt as if she already had a guqin in her hand. The sound of the guqin echoed in her mind. Almost subconsciously, she plucked lightly with her fingers, and the sound of the guqin rang out. At this moment, she realized that it didn't matter whether she had a guqin or not. Because if she wanted to play the music score, she had to use the force as the strings. She lowered her head and looked down. A few strings that glowed brilliantly yet were incomparably clear had unknowingly appeared in front of her. It looked vaguely similar to the one in Senior Ajing's hand, but it was extremely incomplete. It was probably because the music score in her body was still incomplete. However, it was enough for Chu Liyue. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1766. Chu Liyue looked up. Not far in front of her, the puppet also stood motionless. It was expressionless and its eyes were empty. That blow just now clearly made Mao Yang suffer a loss, and it also stunned him. Suddenly, his dark and empty eyes were quickly dyed red with blood. The aura on its body also changed greatly. Chu Liwei was suddenly alarmed. Following that, scales began to appear on the puppet's body. Dark red blood flowed in all directions, almost dyeing his entire body red. What happened next made Chu Liue's pupils shrink. Because the puppet in front of her had gradually evolved into the true appearance of the great phoenix dragon. The pressure from its body was almost the same as the real Mao Yang. The thick smell of blood covered the sky and covered the earth. The sky quickly darkened and in an instant the wind whistled. Chu Liue pursed her lips and stared intently. After this puppet transformed into its true form, its strength was obviously stronger than before. Those scarlet eyes were cold, bloodthirsty and cruel. It stared at Chu Liue as if it was looking at a prey that it was determined to kill. Chu Liue's heart felt as if it was being squeezed tightly by something. The blood in her limbs and bones seemed to have solidified and her entire body was cold. Without hesitation she plucked the strings again. Playing. Although the song was not complete, Chu Liue had already listened to it countless times during the long time she was trapped in the black wall. So at this time, almost instinctively, her white hands quickly swept across the strings. For a moment the sound of the zither was desolate, and the murderous aura was cold. In midair the great phoenix dragon raised its head and roared, almost shaking the world. Chu Liue felt that the force in her body seemed to be boiling at this moment. She forced herself to calm down, and the sound of the zither became even more urgent. Countless red and gold light blades flew out from her hands. These light blades landed on the great phoenix dragon's body, instantly leaving several wounds. But at this time the great phoenix dragon's recovery ability seemed to be stronger. In just a few breaths of time those wounds had completely healed. Not even the slightest trace was left behind. Whoosh! The great phoenix dragon swung its huge tail. A strong gust of wind swept over, messing up her hair and almost cutting her skin. Her eyes reflected an extremely dangerous purple-gold color. A burning sensation suddenly came from between his eyebrows. A strange pattern gradually appeared between her brows. An indescribably vast pressure came from within. The great phoenix dragon seemed to have sensed something and suddenly paused. During this moment of hesitation, Chu Liue quickly made his move. She used almost all of her strength to pluck the strings. There was a sharp pain in his fingertips. Her slender fingers were cut open by the strings. The blood dripped onto the zither strings and disappeared in the blink of an eye. The sound of the zither paused for a moment. Soon after, two light blades, one pure gold and the other transparent, flew out from her hands. Two light blades flew out at the same time, one in front and one behind, piercing into the great phoenix dragon's body. It entered his head. A stab from the tail. This painful blow finally caused the great phoenix dragon to let out a mournful cry. Because of the pain, its body frantically jumped and swung in midair. However, the two light blades seemed to be much stronger than the previous ones. At this time, one head and one tail were nailed to the ground. No matter how it struggled, it could not break free. At the same time, Mao Yang, who was in the Great Void Temple, suddenly trembled and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Patriarch. When the elders saw this scene, they were all shocked and panicked. Wasn't the blood sacrifice already done? Logically speaking, the Shangguan should not be able to hold on for long. Why did it hurt the patriarch now? Mao Yang supported himself with one hand on the coiling dragon pillar and gritted his teeth. His heart was filled with hatred. What was going on with this Shangguan? Every time he thought that she was at the end of her rope, she would always be able to turn the tables. No one knew how many trump cards she still had on her. This was simply too infuriating. What's going on with that zither sound? He could not help but shout in a low voice. Everyone looked at each other. In fact, they also wanted to know the answer. When the zither sound was heard just now, they heard it clearly. The zither sound contained too much power. Even they could faintly feel their hearts trembling. What kind of zither sound could withstand the demon-slaying formation? Even the patriarch's blood sacrifice could not take its life? Don't you feel that something is wrong? From the beginning until now, the Shangguan has been fighting with us. Rong Xiu has not done anything. I wonder what's going on? One of the elders said nervously. They were outside and could not know what was going on inside the coiling dragon pillar. Even if the demon-slaying formation was activated, they could only make a rough guess. As for what was going on inside, they could not know. Also, there are a total of 4 light spots here. Other than the Shangguan Yu and Rongxiu, there are 2 others whose identities are unknown. There were too many uncertainties about those 2 people. Mao Yang's face darkened. Of course he had thought of all these. However, those 2 people had been hiding inside the pillar. As for what was going on inside, the people outside did not know. The demon-slaying formation had condensed one of his puppets. At most, he could only know what was going on between the puppets and their opponents. From the beginning until now, the Shangguan Yu had been the one fighting. As for Rongxiu, he had not appeared at all. Therefore he did not know what Rongxiu was doing. This made Mao Yang even more frustrated. What was the relationship between the Rongxiu and the Shangguan Yu? Logically speaking, under such circumstances he would not let the Shangguan Yu fight alone. Unless the Rongxiu had more important things to deal with. However, what could they have encountered in the coiling dragon pillar for him to do this? A strong sense of uneasiness rose in Mao Yang's heart. It was as if something bad was about to happen. However, he had no idea what was going to happen. Mao Yang wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Then he placed his palm on the coiling dragon pillar again and activated the power in his body even more crazily. Continue. I'd like to see how long Shangguan Yu can hold on for. He did not believe that a human could be so lawless in the great phoenix dragon's territory. When the elders heard this, they had no choice but to return to their original positions and attack again. Roar. A shrill and crazy dragon roar resounded through the heavens and earth. A purplish gold light flashed past and blood splattered everywhere. That great phoenix dragon puppet had actually cut off its own tail that had been nailed to the ground. Blood dripped everywhere. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. The dragon swung its broken tail and charged toward Chu Liyue again. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1767. However, at this moment, a powerful pressure suddenly spread from behind Chu Liyue. She was startled and suddenly realized something. A pair of iron arms suddenly wrapped around her waist. A cold fragrance mixed with a faint bitter medicinal fragrance silently enveloped her. Chu Liyue's tense mind instantly relaxed. She looked back and saw that Rongxiu had unknowingly appeared behind her. She looked up and fixed her gaze on Rongxiu. Then she was slightly stunned. That handsome and charming face did not have the slightest bit of haggard and fatigue. His phoenix-like eyes were deep and his brows were relaxed. Chu Liyue was momentarily speechless and did not know what to say. How difficult was it to help the great phoenix dragon reconstruct its physical body? However, Rongxiu did not seem to be affected at all. For a moment, a thought even popped up in Chu Liyue's mind. To Rongxiu, this seems like a small matter that he can easily accomplish. Seeing that she was in a daze, the corners of Rongxiu's lips curled up slightly. He lowered his head slightly and kissed her forehead gently, his eyes filled with tenderness. It's been hard on you. Although he had been busy over there, he knew everything that had happened here. Chu Liyue subconsciously shook her head. Of course I will protect my man. When Rongxiu heard this, a faint light flashed across his eyes and the smile on his lips deepened. He hugged her slender waist tightly as if he wanted to rub her into his bones. Bang! A loud crashing sound came from behind. The great phoenix dragon had swung its broken tail fiercely, but it had collided with a reddish-gold boundary. Above the boundary, brilliance was circulating and the pressure was impressive. It easily blocked the broken tail outside and it didn't even cause a ripple. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. She looked over Rongxiu's shoulder and behind him. A tall and sturdy figure had unknowingly appeared at the side of the lake. It was a man who looked to be in his 40s. He was dressed in a black brocade robe and had a square face. His eyes were as deep as the sea of stars, making him unfathomable. From head to toe he exuded an indescribably powerful aura. The only thing lacking was that the position of the 2 arms was empty. That was because the 2 wing bones on the skeleton had already fused with Zichen's body. However, even though he was standing there, his aura did not diminish in the slightest. Some people were destined to be the noblest and most powerful existences since birth. Mao Zhen was such a person. Just his aura alone was far superior to Mao Yang's. At this moment Chu Liyue suddenly understood why Mao Yang had such a deep hatred for Mao Zhen back then, and why he had used all means to get rid of her at all costs. As long as such a person existed, he, Mao Zhen, would never be able to make a name for himself. Unfortunately, no matter how much Mao Yang calculated, he was still one step behind. He would never have thought that Mao Zhen, whom he thought had been dealt with long ago, was still alive. At this moment, after being blocked by the barrier, the great phoenix dragon also looked over unwillingly. However, when the great phoenix dragon saw the figure standing there, it suddenly stopped in its tracks. Mao Zhen laughed and shouted with full energy, "Mao Yang, I haven't seen you for a long time. How have you been?" Mao Yang was shocked and uncontrollably took a few steps back. His eyes widened as he stared at the coiling dragon pillar in front of him, his eyes full of disbelief. The chaos on his side inevitably affected the other elders, and the entire Demon Slayer conference began to shake unstably. The various elders had also heard the voice. When they saw Mao Yang's extremely strange reaction, their hearts were filled with doubt. That, who's talking? Doesn't sound like Rong Xiu or Shangguan Yu. More importantly, that person had directly called the clan leader Mao Yang's name and even said, "How have you been?" Then was it someone the clan leader knew from before? Moreover, Mao Yang seemed to have known the other party's identity the moment he heard that voice. Just as everyone was confused, Mao Fushan's expression suddenly changed. This voice, could it be Mao Zhen? His voice was extremely soft when he said the last two words. However, in the quiet hall, it was like thunder that exploded in everyone's hearts. Mao Zhen. This name had not been mentioned for too many years. It was the great Phoenix Dragon clan's shame and also their taboo. They had almost forgotten this person's existence. Now that Mao Fushan suddenly mentioned it, they suddenly remembered that person who used to be extremely talented, but eventually became a fierce and crazy person. Nearly a third of the people present had never seen Mao Zhen. However, this name was like thunder to their ears. At this moment, when this name was mentioned, it immediately caused everyone to fall into an even colder silence and deathly silence. In fact, the entire Great Phoenix Dragon clan had never forgotten this name. This person. After a long time, an elder asked in a trembling voice, "This? How is this possible? Wasn't Mao Zhen already dead? Moreover, he died 1,000 years ago. Why did he suddenly appear in the coiling dragon pillar?" No one spoke. They all knew in their hearts that no matter how impossible this matter sounded, Mao Fushan and Mao Yang's reaction was already better than 1,000 words. The person who spoke inside must be Mao Zhen without a doubt. Mao Yang's mind was blank, his ears were buzzing and his body was cold. Mao Zhen. The moment he heard that voice, he knew the other party's identity. How is he still alive? How is he still alive? Mao Yang suddenly came back to his senses and suddenly raised his head. He stared at the coiling dragon pillar with a paranoid and a trace of madness. At this moment, countless thoughts flashed through his mind. Could it be that Mao Zhen had been hiding here for the past 1,000 years? Boom. The coiling dragon pillar suddenly shone brightly. The dragon carvings on the pillar seemed to have come alive at this moment. Every piece of its scales was shining brightly. At first glance, it was so lifelike that it seemed like it would fly up from the coiling dragon pillar at any time. Mao Yang's heart suddenly sank. He opened his mouth, and just as he was about to order everyone to gather and attack again, an incomparably powerful aura exploded from the dragon's body. Then a terrifying force came rushing over. Mao Yang knew that something was wrong and wanted to retreat, but it was too late. Bang! The door of the Taishu temple suddenly broke open. A strong wind came and directly flipped Mao Yang over. His body instantly flew out uncontrollably and fell outside the door. Puff! It was as if something had ruthlessly crushed his body. His chest shook and he uncontrollably spat out a mouthful of blood. Almost at the same time, a purple gold light rushed out from the coiling dragon pillar. A tall and burly figure stood not far in front of Mao Yang and laughed loudly. "Mao Yang, I haven't seen you for 1,000 years. I thought you had improved, but it turns out that you're still as useless as before." The people who were waiting in the square were stunned when they saw this scene. What's going on? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1768. Mao Yang was the clan leader. How could he be chased out of the Great Void Temple in such a pathetic state? And who was that man? Countless gazes converged on him. That man looked to be in his 40s. He had a square face and a muscular body. His aura was astonishing. He was also a great void phoenix dragon. Only his sleeves were empty, as if he was missing 2 arms. However, this did not affect his majesty and nobility at all. Just by standing there, he already made people subconsciously look up to him and submit to him. The square was dead silent. Everyone stared blankly at this scene. After a while, an older person finally reacted. That is... His lips trembled for a long time, but he still did not say that name. At this moment, Mao Yang finally stood up. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared in front of him. His fists were clenched so tightly that his bones were almost crushed. Mao Zhen, it's really you. Every word seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps between his teeth. You're actually not dead yet. His eyes were filled with undisguised hatred. When the surrounding people heard this, they were all dumbfounded. Mao Zhen? Could it be that Mao Zhen from 1,000 years ago? Mao Zhen laughed. You're not dead yet, Mao Yang. How can I die? I still have to live well so that I can settle all the scores with you from back then. Mao Yang's heart seemed to be clenched by something and his eyes flickered. However, he was not an ordinary person. To be able to fight his way out of the encirclement and become the clan leader was enough to prove his strength. Therefore, the guilt only lasted for a moment, and he quickly controlled his expression. He laughed and slowly wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Scores from back then? Mao Zhen, although I remember the friendship between you and me back then, you did something that let down the entire clan. Now that I'm the clan leader, I really can't plead for you and I can't stand on your side. All these years, everyone thought that you had fallen, but I didn't expect you to secretly hide. You even hid in the Great Void Temple's coiling dragon pillar. You stayed there day and night. Don't you feel any guilt towards your ancestors and your clansmen? As soon as he said this, the crowd was in an uproar. Not only did Mao Zhen not die, she even hid in the Great Void Temple. I didn't expect him to be Mao Zhen. His arrogance is exactly the same as the rumors. That's right, didn't they say that he had already died back then? How did he end up? Also, the coiling dragon pillar, the people of our clan can only enter it once in their lifetime. Didn't he enter it before? How did he manage to hide there for 1,000 years? That's true. Moreover, we've held many thousand peaks in the past 1,000 years. Why haven't we noticed his existence? He's a sinner of the clan, and it wasn't easy for him to drag out an ignoble existence until today. How could he casually expose himself? On the square, many people were discussing something in low voices. It could be seen that their attitude towards Mao Zhen was very disgusted and angry. People who killed their own kind and betrayed their own kind deserved to die. Mao Zhen had heard those words clearly. Mao Zhen could clearly see the look in those people's eyes. However, there was not the slightest trace of anger on his face. Instead, he smiled. The scene was all too familiar. 1,000 years ago, it was also here that those people convicted him, sentenced him, and sent him to hell. There were many details at that time that he could no longer remember clearly. However, he still clearly remembered the anger and unwillingness at that time, as well as the huge sense of betrayal and injustice. A long time had passed, and now, when faced with such a situation again, he was completely relieved. Mao Yang saw the smile on his face and immediately felt that it was very dazzling. What was he smiling about? Could he not tell what kind of attitude these people had towards him? Even if he was still alive and had returned, the entire tribe of the Great Phoenix Dragons would not accept him. How could he still smile? Mao Yang could not help but ask. Mao Zhen, don't you have anything to say to all these questions? With the support of these people, Mao Yang suddenly felt a lot more confident. He knew which debt Mao Zhen wanted to settle with him, but after his initial shock and panic, he thought carefully and was not flustered anymore. What was he afraid of? Everything that happened back then was flawless. Mao Zhen definitely did not have any evidence. If he did, why would he wait until now to bring it out? Moreover, so many years had passed. Everything was a foregone conclusion and buried by the dust of time. How could he still have a chance to turn things around? Thinking of this, Mao Yang straightened his back and even looked at Mao Zhen with an aggressive gaze. Everyone gradually quieted down and waited for Mao Zhen's answer. However, in the face of Mao Yang's questioning, Mao Zhen did not seem to care at all. He snorted as if he had heard a joke. Then he suddenly turned around and looked at the Great Void Temple. You guys come over too. These words were full of energy. Every word was like a heavy hammer that ruthlessly smashed into the hearts of everyone. Everyone's gazes followed his gaze. Who was he calling? The door of the Great Void Temple was still open. The few elders who were previously inside had already walked out when Mao Zhen kicked Mao Yang out. Logically speaking, there should be no one in the main hall at this time. Suddenly, Mao Yang seemed to have thought of something and his expression changed. Wait. There were indeed people inside who had not come out. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, Mao Zhen saw two figures walking out of the Great Void Temple side by side. When he saw the faces of the two people, Mao Yang suddenly clenched his fists. Rong Xiao and Shangguanyu. It was indeed them. Almost in an instant, Mao Yang connected the dots of the previous events. It was no wonder that Rong Xiao and Shangguanyu could enter the spiraling dragon pillar without anyone noticing. It was no wonder that Mao Zhen, who did not even have a corpse, had regained his physical body. It was obvious that they had joined forces. After figuring this out, Mao Yang almost wanted to laugh out loud. Mao Zhen had really gone crazy. In order to rebuild his physical body and come back for revenge, he had actually colluded with the human race. Not only him but the entire Great Void Phoenix Dragon tribe would not let this matter go easily. This was simply another humiliation to the tribe. He did not believe that the Great Void Phoenix Dragon, who had been arrogant for tens of thousands of years, would accept such a thing. However, just as he was about to sneer and mock them, he saw a small figure behind Rong Xiao and Shangguanyu. It looked like a 3- or 4-year-old girl. She was as fair as snow and adorable and wore a pure gold lotus leaf dress. Her hair was tied up in 2 buns. When she walked, the red string bell on her head would jingle. It was crisp and pleasant to the ear. At this moment she was hugging a purplish gold ball of light and following closely behind. Mao Yang was stunned for a moment before he took in a deep breath of cold air. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1769. Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix. There was no mistaking the aura of that girl. She was undoubtedly a crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Soon everyone in the square noticed the existence of Tuanzi, and they all exclaimed in shock. That's a crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Why would a crimson gold heavenly phoenix appear on Divine Dragon Island? Oh, he still looks very young. How did she transform into a human? The square was in an uproar. Mao Yang suddenly thought of something and his pupils constricted. This was the contracted divine beast of Shangguanyu. But wasn't this crimson gold heavenly phoenix blocked outside Divine Dragon Island? Why did it appear here now? Countless thoughts flashed through his mind and it was extremely chaotic. Mao Yang gradually realized that many things had gotten out of his control. Everything was developing in an unpredictable and dangerous direction. He immediately took a step forward, pointed at Mao Zhen and shouted sternly, "Mao Zhen, aren't you going too far? Not only did you collude with the human race to let them enter the coiling dragon pillar, you even let the crimson gold heavenly phoenix follow in. What are you planning to do? Ask yourself honestly, are you worthy of your ancestors? Are you worthy of the great Phoenix Dragon clan?" At this moment Rong Xiao and Chu Luyue had already walked to Mao Zhen's side. Dumpling was also beside them. The purplish gold ball of light in her arms was Zichen. This ball of light was even bigger than her small body. Fortunately, she was not an ordinary human child, but a crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Therefore it was not tiring to hold this ball of light. When they reached the place, Dumpling put down the ball of light again and let out a long breath. For some reason, Zichen had not come out until now. The purplish gold light had completely covered his body. Even Dumpling, who was standing very close, could not see the situation inside clearly. Chu Liwei smiled and patted her head. "Dumpling, thank you for your hard work." Originally she was going to bring Zichen out herself. However, before she could do anything, Dumpling beat her to it. "Not at all. It's only right to take care of your little brother." Dumpling grinned widely. Chu Liwei raised his eyebrows and glanced at the ball of light again. At this moment, Zichen's figure could no longer be seen. The surging aura of the ball of light had also calmed down. She smiled but didn't say anything. Mao Zhen asked, "How are you guys?" Rong Xiao laughed. "With Senior Mao Zhen here we are naturally safe and sound." Only then did Mao Zhen relax. Now his attitude towards Rong Xiao and Shangguanyu was completely different from before. Although he had been busy fusing with the physical body, he was aware of everything that had happened around him. These two people were indeed much more powerful than he had expected. It was all thanks to these two that he was able to come out of that place. Therefore he had long regarded them as one of his own. Don't worry. As long as I'm around, no one will dare to touch you on Divine Dragon Island. Mao Zhen's voice was low and domineering. When everyone heard this, they looked at each other in shock. What was Mao Zhen doing? The great Void Phoenix dragon race had always treated the human race coldly and even with disdain. Not to mention these two. However, Mao Zhen had actually publicly protected them with such fanfare. Mao Yang almost laughed out loud. Mao Zhen's actions were undoubtedly cutting off his escape route. The dragon race would never accept such a person. What awaited him was still a dead end. He sneered. Mao Zhen, it seems like you're determined to betray the dragon race? Mao Zhen finally turned around and laughed. Mao Yang, I should be the one asking you these questions. Don't you feel guilty saying these words in front of the ancestors and the other dragon race? Mao Yang's heart sank. He was about to speak when Mao Zhen interrupted him. Oh, I almost forgot. This is what you're best at, isn't it? You did these things in the past. Naturally, you can do them now. Mao Zhen's words confused everyone. Mao Yang said with a cold face. I don't know what you're talking about. Mao Zhen, you committed a serious crime in the past and luckily escaped. Now you're doing it again. This time, no matter what, I have to deal with you to appease the ancestors in heaven. Men, take them all down. Dead or alive. The square fell silent for a moment. Mao Fushan frowned and said, Patriarch, their identities are unusual, especially the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix. If we kill them directly, I'm afraid there will be endless trouble in the future. Moreover, there are many things that have not been investigated. Mao Yang glanced at him. Elder Fushan, I know that you used to love Mao Zhen very much, but please take a look at what he has done. We've already done our duty by killing him directly. Don't tell me you still want to keep him here to harm our people. As for the two people in the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix, they trespassed on our Divine Dragon Island and even used some tricks to enter the Great Void Temple. They deserved to die. No one had the right and position to plead for mercy for them. Mao Fushan frowned even more. He did admire Mao Zhen back then, but when it came to major issues, he knew what he should do and what he shouldn't do. Now he just wanted to investigate some things. For example, how did Mao Zhen enter the Great Void Temple again and stay in the coiling dragon pillar for thousands of years? Also, what's up with his physical body? Also, the relationship between Rong Xiu and the other person Mao Zhen and this entire incident. There were too many questions that had not been answered. Mao Yang did not seem to want to investigate at all. He did not know if it was his illusion. Mao Yang seemed to want to kill Mao Zhen and the others immediately. It was not an exaggeration to say that he could not wait. He only said a few words of advice, but Mao Yang's emotional reaction was very intense. It was really strange. Mao Zhen was wrong, but as the patriarch, it was not appropriate for Mao Yang to act like this. Seeing that Mao Fushan was rebuked by Mao Yang, the others felt that something was wrong, but they all fell silent. Mao Yang glanced around coldly. What are you waiting for? Zush. The surrounding elders all stepped forward. They were ready to take down these people together. Mao Zhen snorted. Mao Zhen, we haven't settled the score yet. Why are you in such a hurry? Since we're all here today, let's do the math. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1770. The moment Mao Zhen spoke, his powerful aura caused everyone to stop in their tracks. Back then you cruelly killed 7 of your own kind. That is your first crime. Then you took advantage of the critical moment when I was breaking through and attacked me. You even blamed the deaths of those 7 people on me. That is your second crime. Finally, you took advantage of the fact that I was imprisoned in 7 Lotus Peak to forcibly take away my bloodline power to improve your own talent. That is your third crime. Mao Yang, which one of these crimes wasn't done by you? You have committed so many crimes and are responsible for the deaths of so many of your own kind. How dare you question me? Mao Zhen's expression was cold and his gaze was as sharp as a knife. He stared at Mao Yang and did not hide his sarcasm. I would like to ask you instead. You stepped on the bones and blood of your own kind to ascend to the position of the clan leader. Have you been sitting there steadily for so many years? Mao Zhen's voice reverberated in the square. It fell clearly into everyone's ears. Dead silence. Everyone instinctively looked at Mao Yang. Didn't Mao Zhen do all those things back then? What did it have to do with Mao Yang? Mao Yang gritted his teeth when he sensed those gazes. In the end, he couldn't stop Mao Zhen from saying those words. Fortunately, he had already made sufficient mental preparations beforehand, so he was able to perfectly control his expression and reaction at this time. He laughed coldly as if he had heard something funny. Mao Zhen, what nonsense are you talking about? Those 7 clansmen were indeed killed by you, and the evidence back then was irrefutable. You can't deny it. This matter has been settled a long time ago. Now you say that I killed them? Isn't that too ridiculous? Moreover, what reason do I have to go through so much trouble to frame you? Mao Zhen raised his eyebrows. The reason? Don't you know it best? Back then you were just a mediocre talent. Even without me, there were many people in the clan who were more outstanding than you. Why is it that the position of the clan leader has been given to you? When this question was asked, many people's expressions immediately changed. In fact, many people had always been curious about this matter. At that time, Mao Yang was indeed not considered a peak existence in the clan. The talent tested at the 1000 Summit could only be considered to be above average. But ever since the 1000 Summit, his talent and strength had soared. Everyone thought that this was because Mao Yang had obtained an extremely powerful inheritance after entering the Great Void Temple at the 1000 Peaks. It wasn't that there hadn't been such a precedent in the clan before, but his change was the most obvious. He began to constantly surpass his peers in the clan. In addition, Mao Zhen had already fallen at that time. Without a doubt, he became the most outstanding one. Naturally, the position of the clan leader also fell into his hands. But now Mao Zhen said that Mao Yang had seized his bloodline power. On second thought, it doesn't seem impossible. Mao Yang keenly sensed the change in the atmosphere around him. He was a little flustered in his heart, but he still pretended to be calm on the surface and sneered. You said I stole your bloodline power? Then how are you still alive today? Without the support of his bloodline, he would have died a long time ago. Mao Zhen laughed. Naturally, it's because I divided the bloodline power into several parts. You think you stole all of my bloodline power, but you don't know that it's only a small part. To think that you would treat such a small thing as a supreme treasure. Mao Yang, isn't your bloodline power too lowly? Moreover, your vision is so narrow that it's laughable. Mao Yang's face instantly stiffened, and there seemed to be a flame burning between his chest and abdomen. In fact, he had sensed that something was wrong a long time ago. Because after obtaining Mao Zhen's bloodline power, the growth of his talent was not as strong as he had expected. But gradually he felt that this was not bad. On one hand, his talent and strength had indeed increased a lot. At the very least, it was enough for him to crush other people of the same clan. On the other hand, he would not arouse too many suspicions. If someone asked, he would say that it was because he had obtained a good inheritance. Anyway, he could rely on this to get everything he wanted. What was there to care about? Therefore, he had not thought too much about this matter all these years. Until now, when he heard Mao Zhen's words. The reason he was so angry and crazy was not because of what Mao Zhen said, but because of Mao Zhen's arrogant tone. It was as if others could only be trampled under his feet and never be able to turn over. He hated this feeling the most. In the past, Mao Zhen was the pride of the heavens, the most dazzling existence in the entire clan. But now he was just a sinner who had betrayed the clan. He had relied on the half of the remains of the Shangguanyu to barely reconstruct his body, and he did not even have 2 arms. Yet he still dared to be so arrogant. What a joke. The world had changed a long time ago. Nonsense. Mao Zhen, I think you're still crazy. As Mao Yang spoke, he looked at the surrounding people and sternly reprimanded. What are you waiting for? Didn't you hear my order just now? Mao Yang rarely lost his temper in front of others. But at this time he seemed to have changed into a different person. From head to toe he exuded a cold aura that made people shudder. Some people secretly exchanged glances and frowned. At this time not only Mao Fushan, but they also noticed that Mao Yang seemed to be a little anxious. He was in a hurry to get rid of Mao Zhen as if he could not wait another minute. Just as the surrounding people were about to make a move, Mao Fushan suddenly said, "Wait." He had a high prestige in the clan, so when he spoke those people stopped. Mao Yang asked with a cold face, "What, Elder Fushan, are you really going to speak up for him?" Mao Fushan stroked his beard and said slowly, "Patriarch, you misunderstand. I'm doing this for your own good. Mao Zhen slandered you like this, and it's extremely serious for your reputation to be damaged. If you kill him now, it will show that you have a guilty conscience and confirm his accusations. In my opinion, it's better to thoroughly investigate this matter. This is the best for you and the entire clan. What do you think? Although Mao Fushan's tone was questioning, his determined expression made it clear that he had already decided to do so. Mao Yang gnashed his teeth in hatred. This Mao Fushan was also troublesome. If he had stayed by the side obediently, this matter would have been resolved long ago. But he still jumped out and said that he wanted to investigate all of this. He took a deep breath and barely suppressed the anger in his heart. All right. Since Elder Fushan wants to investigate, then, you can investigate. He did not believe that Mao Zhen could not defend himself back then. Now he could still make a comeback. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1771. Miao Fushan nodded and took a step forward to look at Mao Zhen. Something seemed to be surging in the depths of his weathered eyes, and his expression was somewhat complicated. Back then he had indeed thought highly of Mao Zhen and admired him very much. When he heard that Mao Zhen had killed 7 of his own kind, he had been in disbelief. He had even pleaded for mercy on his behalf, hoping that the Patriarch and the others at that time would investigate the matter thoroughly. Unfortunately, the truth came to light later, and everything proved that Mao Zhen was guilty. He had been sad about this for a long time. Not only for Mao Zhen but also for the entire Great Phoenix Dragon tribe. Because Mao Zhen was a publicly acknowledged genius, they had always had high hopes for him, hoping that he could lead the entire Great Phoenix Dragon tribe to greater glory. Unfortunately, everything had turned into an illusion. Who would have thought that they would see Mao Zhen again after 1,000 years? Mao Zhen, do you have any evidence for what you said just now? Miao Fushan asked in a deep voice. Mao Zhen smiled and said frankly, no. Everyone fell silent for a moment, then quickly became noisy. But he had no evidence and he was still so confident. Was he toying with them? Miao Fushan's expression also turned cold. Mao Zhen, you have to pay attention to evidence when you speak. If you don't have evidence, what you said just now proves that what you said was baseless accusations. Mao Yang's eyes flashed with mockery and ridicule. Now there was no need for him to say anything. Mao Zhen's actions had already angered many people. There was no saving him from his own death. Mao Zhen's expression did not change and he was still frank and upright. Back then Mao Yang had destroyed all the evidence in order to put him to death. At that time he had not been able to find any clues, let alone now. Of course it's not baseless accusations. Mao Zhen said. What I said is the truth. Mao Yang sneered. Since there's no evidence, how can we believe you? Are you telling the truth just because you say it's the truth? How could there be such a good thing in the world? At this moment, everyone gradually came to their senses. That's right. Without evidence, how can we believe him? When I saw how confident he was earlier, I thought he really had sufficient evidence. Who knew that he was just talking? That's right. We can't just believe whatever he says. The people who did such crazy things back then can't be trusted at all. In my opinion, the Patriarch should just kill him directly. If you continue to ask, it will only be a waste of energy and time. Everyone was discussing spiritedly, but their attitudes were surprisingly unanimous. Chu Luiyue knitted her brows slightly as she listened. Everyone in the Great Void Phoenix Dragon tribe hated Mao Zhen. It wouldn't be that easy to turn the tables around. As if sensing her thoughts, Rong Xiu held her hand and gently rubbed his fingers on the back of her hand as he softly said, "Don't worry. 1,000 years is too long. It's not a simple matter to change their inherent thinking." Chu Luiyue gently nodded. There weren't many people who were related to that incident that year. Most of the people in the square were juniors. They had been influenced since they were young. When the name Mao Zhen was mentioned, they would subconsciously associate it with words like betrayal and madness. When they saw Mao Zhen, they were naturally biased. It was indeed impossible for them to change their minds with just a few sentences. Unless Mao Zhen could produce solid evidence. But Mao Zhen himself had said that he had no evidence about those things. Chu Liwei looked up and stared at Mao Zhen for a while. The current situation didn't seem to affect him. He was still calm, indifferent and calm. When he looked at Mao Yang, there was even a hint of a mocking smile at the corners of his eyes. Chu Liwei suddenly felt assured. Mao Zhen must have other trump cards. Mao Fushan shook his head, unable to hide his disappointment. He originally thought that, Mao Zhen, since you don't have evidence, then there's no need to continue. Mao Fushan took a step back and raised his hand. The surrounding elders immediately stepped forward. Mao Yang's lips curled into a cold smile, but he quickly pursed it and lowered his eyes to hide the smugness in them. Mao Zhen must die today. However, at this moment Mao Zhen suddenly laughed. I don't have evidence, but what I said just now is the truth. If you don't believe me, I don't care. Because the main purpose of my return today is to take back what belongs to me. As he spoke, he looked at Mao Yang. Mao Yang suddenly felt a chill down his spine. A wave of extremely dangerous aura suddenly attacked. He subconsciously looked up. He saw Mao Zhen looking at him with a faint smile. Mao Yang, you stole my bloodline power back then. After using it for so many years, it's time to return it. As soon as he finished speaking, a purple-gold flame suddenly erupted from his body. At the same time, two faint explosions suddenly came from Mao Yang's back. Bang bang. Two bloody holes appeared on both sides of his shoulder blades. Blood splattered everywhere. Immediately after, flames suddenly burned at the wounds. The blazing flames caused the temperature of the entire square to rise rapidly. Everyone was shocked. Mao Zhen's bloodline power was actually as rich as before. Mao Yang also panicked. He could clearly feel that the power in his body was rapidly flowing away. Mao Zhen. Chi. Before he could finish his sentence, the two balls of flames suddenly turned into knives and ruthlessly cut off Mao Yang's two arms. Then with blood and wind he went straight for Mao Zhen. Digression. Starting from 10 o'clock tonight, Xiaoxiang will be free for 24 hours, so the update on the 10th will be released at 10 o'clock at night. Then Xuqing's free time will be 2 hours later than Xiaoxiang, so the real update will start in the early morning of the 11th. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1772. Mao Yang screamed as his body fell heavily to the ground. Excruciating pain came from his shoulders. It was so painful that he was trembling all over. His two arms had fallen not far from his eyes. Mao Yang's pupils shrank as he saw his two arms lying on the ground, dripping with blood. His body trembled even more violently. An indescribable fear surged from the bottom of his heart. The crowd in the square was also stunned by this scene. Everything happened too quickly. Before they could even react to what had happened, they saw Mao Yang's two arms being chopped off. On the other hand, Mao Zhen's situation was completely different from Mao Yang's. The two balls of flames flew to his front and landed lightly on his shoulders. They quickly transformed into two arms. In the dazzling light, one could vaguely see streaks of blood. A faint smell of blood permeated the air. Chu Liyue was shocked and instinctively looked at Rongxiu. Rongxiu's lips curved slightly and he nodded affirmatively. Chu Liyue widened his eyes slightly. Mao Zhen had taken back his bloodline power and restored his physical body to its original state. Such boldness and strength were really rare. Because of the pain, the veins on Mao Zhen's forehead and neck were bulging. There was even a trace of madness in his eyes. Forcibly regrowing his arms was different from asking Rongxiu to help him rebuild his physical body. From a certain point of view, this meant that they had to endure more danger and torture. After all, one was starting from scratch while the other was breaking it and starting from the beginning. The latter was obviously more difficult. But Mao Zhen still did it without hesitation. As the two arms gradually formed, Mao Zhen's aura rose again. The few elders standing at the front were unable to withstand the pressure and took a few steps back. Their faces were filled with shock. Even if Mao Zhen did not die back then, his physical body was indeed damaged. They could tell that he must have asked Rongxiu and Shang Guanyu for help. However, the level of that skeleton wasn't particularly high. Otherwise, Mao Yao wouldn't have let go of the grave mistake he had made so easily. Logically speaking, Mao Zhen shouldn't have any strength left. But now, not only did he easily defeat Mao Yang, his own cultivation base was still rising. Miao Fushan's expression was complicated. She was still the Mao Zhen from back then. At that time he was the most outstanding genius in the entire clan. Most of the juniors had only heard that he had brutally killed his own kind and had gone mad. They didn't know much about his talents and abilities. In fact, shocking talent only seen once in 10,000 years. This description was absolutely not an exaggeration. Even after so many years, there was still no one who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Not even Mao Yang. Everyone stared at Mao Zhen with their mouths agape, deeply shocked by the scene before them. He didn't even have time to care about Mao Yang, who was lying on the ground. In fact, at this time no one dared to come forward. Mao Zhen could easily cut off both of Mao Yang's arms and forcibly take away the two balls of flames that contained powerful power from his body. This was enough to explain the problem. That power must have belonged to Mao Zhen. If he wanted to take back his bloodline power, who could stop him? In other words, at least this part of what he said just now was absolutely true. Many people's hearts were filled with doubts and confusion. If this was true, then what about the others? Who killed the 7 of his own kind back then? Mao Yang spat out a mouthful of blood, his heart filled with hatred. He wanted to stand up, but without both of his arms, this movement became very difficult. After several attempts he finally succeeded. But at this time his body was covered in dirty blood and he looked extremely miserable. He no longer had the glory and honor of being the clan leader. He stared at Mao Zhen not far away, his eyes dyed with a layer of scarlet. No wonder Mao Zhen was so bold. So there was still such a move. Saying that there was no evidence. It was all nonsense. Mao Zhen was clearly waiting for him here. Mao Yang's hatred for Mao Zhen had reached its peak. He knew very well that no matter what the result was today, his reputation, his status, his everything, would be in jeopardy. He spat out a mouthful of blood and sternly said, "Everyone listen to my order. Mao Zhen has evil intentions, kill him on the spot." But as his voice fell, no one in the square moved. Mao Yang looked around as if he had gone mad. "What, are all of you rebelling? You even turned a deaf ear to this clan leader's order." Mao Fushan looked at him and said indifferently, "Clan leader, now that the truth is gradually emerging, how can we act? But you still haven't explained clearly why Mao Zhen's bloodline power is in your body. I thought that Mao Yang had obtained an excellent inheritance that allowed him to advance by leaps and bounds. But now it seems that there might be a great secret hidden here." Mao Fushan's question left Mao Fushan speechless. His Adam's apple bobbed and his lips trembled, but he did not say anything. How could he explain? There was no way to explain this at all. They were all from the same clan and they all understood the power of bloodlines. It was impossible for him to fool them. Looking at his reaction, Mao Fushan's guess was confirmed. He closed his eyes and sighed softly. Why? Mao Yang's heart turned cold. "Elder Fushan, you would rather listen to the words of a lunatic than believe me?" Mao Fushan paused. "Clan leader, who is the crazy person?" Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1773. Mao Yang was suddenly at a loss for words. Miao Fushan stared into his eyes, his gaze as sharp as a knife. It was as if he wanted to cut him open and see everything. At this moment, Mao Yang suddenly realized that Miao Fushan no longer trusted him. He subconsciously avoided Miao Fushan's gaze. However, the gazes from all directions were faintly converging on him at this moment, causing him to feel as if there were daggers at his back. The feeling of uneasiness grew. Mao Yang's breathing became rapid, his heart beating violently, to the point that he could no longer care about the pain in his body. Miao Fushan retracted his gaze and looked at Mao Zhen. However, he had already made a decision in his heart. He was very familiar with both Mao Zhen and Mao Yang. The current Mao Zhen, on the surface, looked as arrogant as before, but his eyes were firm and restrained from beginning to end. He did not look mad at all. On the other hand, Mao Yang was different. Ever since he knew that Rong Xiao and Shangguan Yu had quietly left Seven Lotus Peak and entered the coiling dragon pillar of the Temple of Void, he had been in a very strange state. Compared to before, not only had he become irritable, but he had also become impulsive. This state reached its peak after seeing Mao Zhen appear. If Mao Yang was really innocent back then, why did he not let Mao Zhen finish? Why did he not agree to let them find out the truth? The answer was obvious. The pain in his body gradually subsided. Mao Zhen slowly opened his eyes and looked down at his arms. "It's really been a long time." He clenched his fists lightly, feeling the surging power in his body, and sighed softly. Back then, Mao Yang had purposely chosen to attack him when he was at his weakest to succeed. He had also tried to defend himself, but unfortunately no one believed him back then. Even if he wanted revenge, he was already an arrow at the end of its flight. There was nothing he could do. In the end, he could only choose to hibernate in the coiling dragon pillar. This wait lasted for over 1,000 years. He had once thought that there was no hope for him to come out. Fortunately, the heavens took pity on him and gave him another chance. Almost at the same time, the purple gold light next to Dumpling suddenly moved. The void trembled and ripples spread out. Chu Liyue looked back, his eyes moving slightly. Then a slender hand reached out from the ball of light. Dumpling suddenly widened her eyes. Hand. A human hand. This. Under her shocked gaze, a tall and slender figure walked out of the purple gold light. It was a young man who looked to be in his 20s. His cheeks were thin and his facial features were deep and handsome. Between his eyebrows, there was a purple gold vertical mark. It made him look even more demonic. He was very tall and wore a long black robe, which made his shoulders seem even wider and his waist narrow, and his figure tall and slender. His eyes were cold and sharp and his lips were extremely thin. When he slightly pursed his lips, it naturally carried a bit of a cold aura, and he was imposing without being angry. Dumpling's black grape-like eyes widened. She pointed her chubby little finger at him and stuttered. You're Zichen? Hearing this, Zichen looked over with an indifferent expression. Thank you for your help. He was thanking Dumpling for all the help she had given him. Zichen had always been a cold and taciturn person. It was not easy for him to say such words. However, at this moment Dumpling was already in a daze. She looked at him blankly and only one thought was left in her mind. He was done for. Her dream of being a big sister was probably going to be ruined. At this thought, Dumpling finally couldn't help but purse her lips. She felt very wronged and disappointed. It turned out that all her previous efforts were in vain. She couldn't even reach Zichen's thigh. In terms of aura, she had lost directly. The point was, Zichen's aura was not inferior to hers. That's right. Mao Zhen's strength had increased, so his strength had naturally increased as well. Dumpling turned around angrily and hugged her two little arms. The bells on her head rang. Agree. She couldn't beat him in the past. After breaking through and becoming a crimson gold celestial phoenix, she had a better chance of winning. But how many days had it been since they started to enjoy this good life? Dumpling was overcome with sorrow and felt that she was really pitiful. Zichen looked at her small back and a trace of surprise flashed across his face. But soon he understood something. His thin lips pursed and a faint trace of helplessness flashed across his eyes. She really had a childish temper. Chu Liyue looked at Zichen and was also quite surprised. She had already guessed that Zichen must be up to something when he didn't come out for so long. But she only thought that he was about to break through. She didn't expect him to directly transform into a human form. One had to know that in the world only two great ancient mythical beasts could do this. Other than the crimson gold celestial phoenix and the great phoenix dragon, no other magical beast could do this, no matter how outstanding they were. This miracle was most likely because Zichen had two wing bones of the great phoenix dragon in his body and also fused with a part of the bloodline power. Of course, the most important person in this was Mao Zhen. If she hadn't used that skeleton to reconstruct her physical body and spur Zichen on, this probably wouldn't have happened. But no matter what, this was a good thing. Sensing her gaze, Zichen also looked over. He walked forward and stopped 3 steps away from Chu Liyue, nodded and bowed. Greetings, master. Chu Liyue's lips curved into a smile. Zichen, congratulations. Suddenly a soft ball pounced on him. Dumpling hugged Chu Liyue's leg tightly and looked up at her. Ayu likes me the most, doesn't she? She must be Ayu's favorite. Zichen listened with an indifferent expression. He didn't care about this kind of thing. Ever since Chu Liyue helped him reconstruct his physical body and let him come back to life, he had already recognized Chu Liyue as his only master. There was no need to say anything more. He would always be loyal to her. As for Dumpling, she had been with Chu Liyue since she was young. She was young and had a pure and innocent personality, so it was inevitable that she would care about these things. Chu Liyue didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She gently pinched her face and coaxed. Of course, Dumpling is so cute. Of course I like Dumpling the most. As soon as she finished speaking, the temperature around her suddenly dropped. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows and smiled faintly. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1774. Chu Liu's back stiffened and she subconsciously looked at Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. Even if he didn't say anything, Chu Liu knew what he meant. It was just because of the words favorite just now. Chu Liu had a headache. Dumpling was a crimson gold heavenly phoenix, her contracted magical beast. What was there to fight about? Now that the situation was so complicated, they were actually fighting about this. Chu Liu felt very tired. He finally understood. Children were hard to coax. Men were also hard to coax. She coughed. I like all of them, ahem. I like all of them. As she spoke, she reached out and held Rong Xiu's hand, her fingertips gently rubbing his palm twice. It was a little itchy. Rong Xiu thought. But it was very delightful. The corners of his lips curled up and he held her hand tightly. Only then did he stop. Dumpling didn't notice this. She just hugged Chu Liu's thigh, pressed her face against it and rubbed it intimately. I don't care. Anyway, you said that she liked it the most. She raised her face proudly and raised her eyebrows provocatively at Zichen. When she grew taller, she would definitely take him in as her little brother. Zichen's eyes moved slightly and then he looked away. The crowd in the square fell into a moment of dead silence because of Zichen's appearance. But soon they started to clamor again. That's the legendary three-eyed eagle? Why did he transform into a human? It's really strange. Don't you feel that he has the aura of our great phoenix dragon race? Isn't that normal? Don't forget, Shangguanyu took the wing bone from his ancestor's skeleton and helped him reconstruct his body. That's true. In that case, the legendary three-eyed eagle and Mao Zhen actually used the same skeleton? It must be. After Mao Zhen's strength increased just now, the aura of the legendary three-eyed eagle also increased a lot. But if that's really the case, then wouldn't Mao Zhen be connected to the three-eyed eagle? All kinds of discussions could be heard from all directions. Many people's expressions changed when they realized the special relationship between Mao Zhen and Zichen. The legendary three-eyed eagle was considered to be of a higher level among the divine beasts, but it was still incomparable to them. Now that something like this had happened, it was truly strange. The more he thought about it, the more uncomfortable he felt. Mao Yang was so angry that he laughed. Elder Fushan, is this the person you chose to believe in? Such behavior is no different from betraying the clan. Even if he, Mao Yang, couldn't become the patriarch, it definitely wouldn't be Mao Zhen. Miao Fushan's expression was solemn, but he didn't say anything. He could roughly guess why Mao Zhen would do this. He had no other choice but to take this path. If the great phoenix dragon wanted to reconstruct its physical body, it had to use the remains of its own kind. Otherwise it would never succeed. Other than asking Shangguanyu for help, what else could he do? As it turned out, it was indeed effective. It was a pity that the legendary three-eyed eagle would cause trouble. It was almost impossible for the people in the clan to accept this. Mao Zhen, what else do you have to say? Mao Fushan asked. Mao Zhen smiled and looked at Mao Yang. I just said that I came back this time to take back what belongs to me. The power of my bloodline and the position of the patriarch. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone was shocked. Mao Zhen was too presumptuous. He actually said that he wanted to take the position of the patriarch? Mao Yang was still here. Mao Yang had already expected him to say this. He couldn't help but sneer. Mao Zhen, this is your real goal, right? The position of the patriarch. Why don't you take a look and see if you're worthy? Even if Mao Zhen proved that he had snatched a part of his bloodline power back then, so what? Mao Zhen couldn't explain the deaths of the 7 clan members no matter what. He couldn't produce the strongest evidence, and this matter would at most become an unjust case. Mao Zhen could pull him down from the position of the patriarch, but he couldn't take it himself. Mao Fushan also shook his head. Mao Zhen, your request is indeed too much. Back then, Mao Zhen was indeed the recognized successor of the patriarch. However, many things happened later, and in the end, Mao Yang became the patriarch. Now, Mao Yang couldn't keep his position as the patriarch. If Mao Zhen could clear up all the misunderstandings and prove his innocence, he might be able to replace him. However, the key was that he couldn't explain everything now. More importantly, he had an extremely special relationship with the legendary three-eyed eagle. Just this alone was enough to make the elders agree to let him become the patriarch. The Great Phoenix Dragon clan had a total of 9 elders, and they had the right to decide many things in the clan. If he wanted to become the patriarch, he had to get the unanimous consent of the 9 elders. Mao Zhen couldn't pass this hurdle alone. Mao Zhen, however, laughed. Elder Fushan, until now you still haven't asked why Mao Yang attacked me back then? Mao Fushan was stunned. What happened just now was too shocking, and he indeed didn't have time to ask this question. He looked at Mao Yang suspiciously. Mao Yang and Mao Zhen didn't seem to have an open conflict in the past. He always thought that it was because Mao Zhen was too outstanding that Mao Yang was jealous and ruthless. Could it be that there was another reason behind this? Mao Yang's body tensed up, but his heart gradually sank. Mao Zhen dared to say this. Didn't that mean that thing was still on him? But how was that possible? Mao Zhen's physical body was destroyed back then. Even if his soul wasn't destroyed, it should be impossible for him to continue keeping that thing. But now Mao Zhen seemed to be quite confident. Mao Yang's mind raced. Could it be that Mao Zhen was lying to him? Mao Fushan asked. Mao Yang, do you have anything to say about this matter? This time he didn't call him patriarch, but directly called Mao Yang by his name. Many people quickly exchanged glances. It seemed that Elder Fushan didn't intend to recognize Mao Yang as the patriarch anymore. When Mao Yang heard this, the corners of his eyes twitched violently. He suppressed the surging emotions in his heart and sneered sarcastically. If you want to condemn someone, why worry about the pretext? Elder Fushan, since you don't believe me, why ask again? I think you might as well ask Mao Zhen directly. Let's see what kind of answer he can give. Mao Zhen laughed. Pao Yang. Since you don't want to say it, then I'll say it. He took a step forward, and the aura around him suddenly fluctuated violently. Then a totem appeared between his eyebrows. At the same time, a purple-gold stream of light gushed out from the totem, and then behind him, it transformed into a huge great phoenix dragon. An indescribable pressure that seemed to come from ancient times silently descended. Mao Fushan's expression changed. The might of the ancestors. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1775. In an instant, the aura was so powerful that it shook the heavens and earth. The great Phoenix Dragon tribe members in the square changed their expressions and knelt down. Welcome, ancestor. In the blink of an eye, everyone in the square had knelt down. Including Miao Fushan and the rest, they all knelt down respectfully. Only Mao Yang's face was filled with shock and horror as he stared at the giant phantom that had suddenly appeared. His mind was blank. Ancestor. This was the power of the ancestor. The ancestor of the great Phoenix Dragon tribe was naturally no longer around. However, that ancestor had purposely left behind an aura in the Great Void Temple to protect the tribe. When the clansmen entered the Great Void Temple, they would feel this faintly discernible aura and pressure. Therefore they were very familiar with this. It was precisely because of this that as soon as the illusory figure appeared, its vast aura suffused the surroundings and instantly caused everyone present to submit to it. Mao Yang's legs trembled and a sense of emptiness surged around him. He was on the verge of collapse, as if he could not stand and fall to the ground at any time. He was well aware of what the scene before him meant. The ancestor's inheritance was indeed still in Mao Zhen's body. And looking at the situation, Mao Zhen might have completely comprehended it. How could this be? How could this be? Mao Zhen raised her eyebrows and looked at Mao Yang. Mao Yang, why didn't you kneel when you saw the Taizu? Mao Yang suddenly regained his senses and his face turned pale. Before he could react, the image of the great Phoenix Dragon suddenly roared towards the sky. An extremely heavy force pressed down on Mao Yang's shoulder. Plop. His body swayed and he knelt heavily on the ground. There was a muffled sound. At the same time there was the sound of bones cracking. The force was so strong that it directly smashed Mao Yang's knee into the ground, and the surrounding cracks spread. His body trembled even more violently and his face turned even paler. The ancestor's power was indeed not to be underestimated. With just this, the bones in his knee were directly broken. When everyone heard this sound, they all looked over. When they saw Mao Yang's current sorry state, they had different expressions. Who would have thought that clan leader Mao Yang, who had always been glorious and honorable, would actually be in such a difficult situation one day? The might of the ancestors descended and directly punished Mao Yang. This time, everyone was even more afraid to approach him and no one dared to speak up for him. Although the patriarch's status in the clan was extremely high, the current situation was special. Mao Yang had obviously used dishonorable means to seize a portion of Mao Zhen's bloodline power and use it to ascend to the position of patriarch. Just this point alone was enough for the 9 elders to join hands and remove him from the position of clan leader. Not to mention the might of the ancestors had also descended. Of course they were led by their ancestors. Mao Zhen looked at Miao Fushan and the others. Elders, please get up first. I still need all of you to be present as witnesses for the rest of the events. Hearing his words, the various elders, including Miao Fushan, first looked at each other a few times before standing up uneasily. It wasn't that they were too cowardly, but that too many things had happened today and it was too horrifying. No one would believe it even if he told others about it. In the end, they focused their gazes on Miao Fushan. He was the most senior existence here and his words carried the most weight. It was naturally best for him to step forward. Although Miao Fushan looked calm on the surface, his heart was in turmoil. After some thought, he stepped forward and clasped his hands at Mao Zhen. Of course, this bow was for the phantom of the ancestors above Mao Zhen's head. After bowing respectfully, Miao Fushan looked at Mao Zhen again. He had already guessed something in his heart, but he didn't dare to be sure. Mao Zhen, how did you summon the might of the ancestors? Miao Fushan spoke very slowly. His question was very clear and cautious. Everyone pricked up their ears. Because this was what they were most curious about. After all, no one had ever done this in 10,000 years. Now that Mao Zhen had done it, how could they not be shocked? Mao Zhen laughed and said in a clear voice. Elder Fushan, this is the question I asked you before. Back then, the most important reason why Mao Yang spent so much effort and spared no expense to kill me was that I obtained the inheritance of the ancestors at the Thousand Summit. Countless people sucked in a cold breath. The inheritance of the ancestors. For so many years, no one in the Great Phoenix Dragon race had obtained it. But they didn't expect that Mao Zhen had already. Miao Fushan was also taken aback and subconsciously asked, what did you say? Back then you obtained the inheritance of the ancestors at the Thousand Summit. Mao Zhen smiled and said nothing. But this was equivalent to admitting it. In fact, even if he didn't say it, everyone knew that it was true. In an instant, countless images appeared in Miao Fushan's mind. It was as if there was a string that finally connected those fragments together. No wonder Mao Yang wanted to kill him. No wonder he could escape from the desperate situation back then and hide in the coiling dragon pillar for 1,000 years. No wonder he could survive 1,000 years without being defeated even though he only had a soul. Now, there was an explanation for all of this. He had the inheritance of the ancestors. Mao Zhen, he was the heir chosen by the ancestors. But why didn't we know about this, only Mao Yang? Miao Fushan was puzzled. Under normal circumstances, the people of the race wouldn't say what inheritance they obtained from the coiling dragon pillar, and no one would ask about it in detail. But Mao Zhen's situation, he should have said it directly. If he had said it back then, the position of the patriarch would have fallen into his hands. How could he have given Mao Yang the chance to cause so much trouble? Mao Zhen laughed self-deprecatingly. This is really my fault. I was too arrogant back then and didn't have enough vigilance. I can only say that I deserved to suffer such a big loss. Back then he was the pride of the race and was incomparably arrogant. After obtaining the inheritance of the ancestors, this pride turned into arrogance. He didn't say this immediately, only wanting to wait until he comprehended the inheritance of the ancestors before announcing it. However, before he could wait for that day, Mao Yang had already set up a series of schemes to frame him. At that time he wasn't prepared at all. By the time he realized that something was wrong and wanted to counterattack, it was already too late. This delay lasted for 1,000 years. He looked at Mao Yang. The latter was already kneeling on the ground, his face ashen. Nothing could prove everything more than this. This time he was really finished. Mao Zhen walked forward and stood in front of Mao Yang, looking down at him. Mao Yang, you've stolen the power of my bloodline and the position of the patriarch for many years. Now it's time to return it, right? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1776. Mao Yang subconsciously struggled to get up. But that heavy and terrifying pressure firmly suppressed him, rendering him unable to move. Deep despair and fear surged from the bottom of his heart. Intense emotions surged in his chest, finally causing his chest to tremble, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Mao Zhen waved his sleeve, and a purple-gold stream of light formed a barrier in front of him. Mao Yang's blood splashed on it and quickly burned away. "Don't dirty my clothes." Mao Zhen's expression was indifferent, his voice cold. Mao Yang felt even more resentful and humiliated. His lips trembled, but he could not say a word, only spitting out a few more mouthfuls of blood. After this torment, his face was as pale as a ghost, and he was on the verge of death. Mao Zhen looked at Mao Fushan and the several elders standing next to him. "Since I have inherited the ancestors' legacy, I will naturally replace Mao Yang as the patriarch. I wonder if any of the elders have any objections?" After a brief silence, Mao Fushan spoke first. "Since the ancestor has already made the decision, we will naturally comply." The other elders nodded in agreement after hearing his words. "We have no objections." This was not because they had submitted to Mao Zhen's pressure, but because they were sincere. In the past they had misunderstood Mao Zhen, but now, everything in front of them was enough to prove Mao Zhen's innocence. Even if he had not inherited the ancestors' legacy, he was absolutely qualified. In all these years, no one had truly surpassed Mao Zhen. He was also the #1 genius and expert in the clan. It was natural for him to be the patriarch. After a moment of silence, the people kneeling in the square all saluted and shouted, "Congratulations, patriarch." Their shouts shook the heavens, their momentum grand. Most people had excited expressions on their faces. The initial shock and confusion had completely dissipated. Only joy and excitement remained. How could they not be happy? Mao Yang had done all kinds of evil. Back then he had used insidious methods to seize the patriarch's position. He was the shame of the entire clan. Now that he had been demoted, it was reasonable. But Mao Zhen had not only clarified the truth of that year, but also, he had inherited the ancestors' legacy. Such a person as the patriarch was naturally different. Even if he had a special relationship with the legendary three-eyed eagle, it was nothing compared to the recognition of the ancestor. Thinking about it, it made sense why Mao Zhen was able to hide in the coiling dragon pillar for so many years. Wasn't it all because of the ancestors' favor? There was nothing to dispute about this matter. Hearing the almost boiling cheers of celebration, Mao Yang rolled his eyes and fainted. Mao Zhen gestured with his hand and the square quickly quieted down. Chu Luiyue was secretly amazed. That was exactly what the saying, strict obedience to orders and prohibitions. Mao Zhen had just returned and she had already received so much support from everyone. She was indeed extraordinary. She winked at Rongxiu. This time they had truly helped the right person by lending a helping hand. Rongxiu's lips curved up and he held her hand even tighter. This trip to Divine Dragon Island was indeed unexpected. But fortunately it was more daunting than dangerous, and he even made a profit in the end. Being able to be on good terms with Mao Zhen was absolutely beneficial to them. This time not only could they leave smoothly, but they could also be considered to have dealings with the Great Void Phoenix Dragon tribe in the future. With this layer of relationship, it would undoubtedly be much more convenient to deal with many things in the future. Mao Zhen said to an elder next to him, "Wake him up." The elder responded and quickly walked forward. He grabbed Mao Yang's collar and gave him 2 resounding slaps without saying a word. Mao Yang's face quickly swelled up, and he was also awakened by the sharp pain. He opened his eyes angrily and saw Mao Zhen and the elder in front of him, who was about to give him a 3rd slap. He immediately understood. He was still here. In an instant, the anger and hatred in his heart turned into panic and fear. He subconsciously shrank back, but his collar was grabbed tightly and he could not move at all. At this time he had lost both of his arms and he had no strength to resist. Mao Zhen smiled, but to Mao Yang this smile was no different from a devil's. "Mao Yang, I know you want a clean death, but how can there be so many things in this world?" Mao Yang immediately had an ominous premonition. "What are you doing?" he asked anxiously and hurriedly. Mao Zhen raised his hand. A piece of purple gold scale armor suddenly appeared in his palm. Then, a dazzling light suddenly flew out from between his eyebrows. It enveloped Mao Yang. The elder immediately let go of his hand and took a few steps back. Mao Yang's body began to roll on the ground as if he was enduring great pain. Soon his body began to change. Soon he actually returned to his true form. Mao Yang's roar was filled with deep panic and fear. Mao Zhen said indifferently, "Don't worry, I won't directly take your life. I just want to seek justice for the 7 of my clansmen." With that, the scale armor in his palm instantly flew out. Kititi. An ear-piercing sound suddenly rang out. Mao Yang's body began to roll even more crazily. Soon, scales dripping with blood fell on the ground. Some were still attached to skin and flesh, looking very bloody and terrifying. Mao Zhen was going to skin him alive. This kind of method could be said to be ruthless. But thinking about the things that Mao Yang had done, it made people feel that this was what he should bear. Such a person indeed deserved to be cut into pieces. Needless to say, he had framed Mao Zhen to such an extent. This was even considered a light punishment for him. Mao Yang's roar gradually became softer, as if he had lost the strength to roll and was on the verge of death. Only when the last dragon scale on his body was scraped off did Mao Zhen say, "Send him to 7 Lotus Peak and give him the last medicine. Be sure to let him recover as soon as possible." Yes. Mao Yang was shocked. Was Mao Zhen planning to repeatedly torture him like this? As if to confirm his guess, Mao Zhen looked at him and raised his lips without a smile. "Mao Yang, what's the hurry? This is just the beginning." Digression. In 2 hours, mobile users please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1777. Mao Yang's eyes widened. His scarlet eyes were filled with hatred and madness. "Mao Zhen, kill me if you want. If you drag this out, aren't you afraid of trouble?" Mao Zhen looked at him strangely. "You think too highly of yourself." Mao Yang's chest tightened and he almost couldn't breathe. Chu Liwei couldn't help but laugh. Not only was Mao Zhen powerful, but he was also good at talking. What Mao Yang hated the most was that he was weaker than Mao Zhen. He had always seen Mao Zhen as a strong opponent, but he didn't think much of him. Nothing could represent a person's contempt more than indifference. There was nothing that could deal a greater blow to Mao Yang than this sentence. Sure enough, Mao Yang became agitated and wanted to continue. However, he was no different from a piece of trash. He couldn't do anything even if he wanted to. In the end, he fell to the ground and lay there in a sorry state, covered in blood. Mao Zhen waved his hand. The people below quickly came forward and took Mao Yang away. Until he was dragged away, the square was still filled with the strong smell of blood. Looking at the mess on the ground, everyone involuntarily quietened down. Their expressions were complicated. Too many things had happened on this day. The clan had undergone a drastic change. It was as if heaven and earth had been turned upside down. Mao Fushan looked at Rong Xiu and Chu Liwei and sighed in his heart. Who would have thought that all this was because of the arrival of these 2 people? If they hadn't barged into Divine Dragon Island, Mao Yang wouldn't have imprisoned them on 7 Lotus Mountain. They wouldn't have found the opportunity to enter the coiling dragon pillar of the Great Void Temple and help Mao Zhen reconstruct his body. All these things were actually caused by these 2 people. After hesitating for a moment, he spoke. "Clan leader, since everything has come to an end, then what do you plan to do with these people?" Since Mao Zhen had become the clan leader, their attitude towards these people was naturally different from before. They were much more polite and gentle. Mao Zhen also sensed his gaze and laughed. "Of course, I'll send them off." He still remembered the deal he made with Rong Xiu. Now that he had taken back everything that belonged to him, he naturally had to fulfill the demands of Rong Xiu. Hearing this, Miao Fushan and the others were surprised. That's it? They thought that Rong Xiu and the others would definitely take this opportunity to make a lot of requests. In the end, they just wanted to leave this place in peace. Rong Xiu's lips curved up slightly. "Congratulations, Senior Mao Zhen. Logically speaking, we should celebrate for you, but we have been delayed here for too long. It is time for us to go back." Mao Zhen walked over and smiled. "What are you talking about? I should be the one thanking you. If it weren't for your help, I would still be stuck in the coiling dragon pillar." He was truly grateful. Those 1,000 years were not easy for him. In the past, just like his clansmen, he despised the human race and thought that they were all treacherous and sinister people. But after this, he had a profound change in his view of this point. At the very least, he valued and respected Rong Xiu and Shangguanyu very much. He glanced at Dumpling. Dumpling immediately put her hands on her waist and raised her small face. "Why are you looking at me?" Although the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix and the Great Phoenix Dragon had never gotten along, she was not afraid at all. Chu Liyue did not know whether to laugh or cry as she pulled Dumpling back. She could feel that Mao Zhen did not have any ill intentions. Not only was Mao Zhen not angry, but she could not help but laugh. Ah, this little fellow is young, but her temper is not small. Don't worry. Since your master has helped me this time, the entire Great Void Phoenix Dragon tribe will not do anything to you. Dumpling blinked a few times. After confirming that the other party's tone was sincere, she heaved a sigh of relief and patted her chest gently. Phew, that's more like it. He was with you. Mao Zhen's smile deepened. She looked at Dumpling and felt a little fond of her. Yizhao is really lucky. Dumpling's talent was obviously very outstanding. Her soft and cute appearance was especially lovable. The Great Phoenix Dragon clan did not have such luck. Hearing him praise her, Tuanzi couldn't help but grin happily. Of course. Grandpa Patriarch and the others doted on her a lot. Mao Zhen looked at her round, white and tender little face. She wanted to go up and pinch it, but she held back in the end. Let's go. I'll personally send you out. Outside Divine Dragon Island. Time passed exceptionally slowly. Every minute and every second was more and more unbearable for Shangguanjing and the others who were waiting. Nansu Huai stared at the teleportation formation with a grave expression and frowned. Is there still no movement? Shangguanjing could not help but ask. Nansu Huai shook his head. No. But, it's been so long, Shangguanjing pinched the bridge of his nose. His expression was somewhat haggard. During this period of time they had been waiting patiently. They did not dare to relax in the slightest, afraid that they would miss something. However, the teleportation formation was still calm. Gradually they began to feel anxious. Chuning comforted. Although the teleportation formation did not react, Divine Dragon Island did not send anyone over. They should still be safe. If the Great Phoenix Dragon clan discovered that something was wrong, they would definitely not sit idly by. Nansu Huai nodded. No news is good news. Let's wait a little longer. Shangguanjing and Chuning could only nod in agreement. At the exit of Divine Dragon Island's barrier, Mao Zhen personally sent Rong Xiao and the others here. I'll stop here for today. Mao Zhen smiled. There are still some things to deal with in the clan. At this time I really can't leave. Rong Xiao and Chu Liyue nodded to express their understanding. The Thousand Summit had just ended and Mao Zhen had just taken the position of patriarch. There were indeed many things to do. Senior Mao Zhen is too polite. It's already beyond our expectations that you can personally send us off, said Rong Xiao with a smile. Mao Zhen was now the patriarch and his status was very different. The fact that he was willing to personally send them off was to express his attitude. In this way, even if some people in the Great Phoenix Dragon clan were still dissatisfied with them, they would greatly restrain themselves in the future. To them this was undoubtedly extremely beneficial. Mao Zhen shook his head and sighed. You have helped me a lot. This small matter is really not much of a reward. If you encounter any trouble in the future, just say the word. I, Mao Zhen, will definitely do my best. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. This sentence was a serious promise. This meant that they would have the Great Void Phoenix Dragon as their backer in the future. Rong Xiao's lips curved slightly. Actually, there's something I really want to trouble you with. Mao Zhen waved his hand. Just say it. Rong Xiao suddenly took out a gold-stamped invitation card and handed it over. In half a month's time you and I will be married. At that time I hope that Senior Mao Zhen will come. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1778. Chu Liyue? The wedding is in half a month? Why didn't she know about it? And this invitation card? When did he prepare it? He actually took it out so casually. Chu Liyue was dumbfounded. Mao Zhen directly took the invitation card. As soon as it entered her hand, a trace of surprise flashed across her eyes. This invitation card was actually made of ink brocade paper. Ink brocade paper was an extremely precious rice paper. It was famous because of its rare materials, complicated craftsmanship and low production. It was also because of these reasons that the price of ink brocade paper was extremely expensive. But even so, ink brocade paper was still extremely popular, causing people to scramble for it like a flock of ducks. This was because the ink brocade paper was extremely thin, but it was very tough. The sharp tip of a knife could not cut it, and ice, water and fire could not destroy it. As long as it was well preserved, It could survive for tens of thousands of years. Not to mention ordinary people, even the first-rate families in the Divine Ruins world might not have much of it. However, such precious ink brocade paper was actually used by Xiao to make a wedding invitation card. She really didn't know if she should say that he was too extravagant or that he valued this wedding too much. And the person who was about to marry him. Mao Zhen carefully looked at the invitation card, then nodded with a smile. Don't worry, when the time comes I will definitely prepare a generous gift and personally congratulate you. Xiao's smile deepened. Then you and I will wait for your arrival. As soon as the two of them walked out of the Divine Dragon Island's barrier, Chu Luiwei grabbed Xiao's hand. Then what's with the invitation card? The wedding is in half a month. Why didn't I know anything about it before? Xiao smiled and let her hold his wrist. His voice was low and gentle. The wedding date was decided by me just now. In fact, this date has been postponed several times. This time I don't want to postpone it anymore. Half a month later we will return to the Yuntian Tower and get married immediately. Although his voice was as gentle and soft as usual, his tone was very firm. Obviously he had made up his mind on this matter. Looking at his deep and calm pair of phoenix eyes, Chu Luiwei was suddenly stunned. She suddenly couldn't bring herself to ask the rest of the questions. Yes. Xiao had already mentioned this matter too many times. It was just that they didn't seem to have the right time and opportunity. Thinking it had been too long. My father. Don't worry, I've already sent someone to invite them. They should be arriving at the Cloud Heaven Tower soon. In addition, your friends and subordinates will also go with you to the Cloud Heaven Tower. Chu Luiwei paused. Xiao's lips curved up as he patiently explained. Mu Hongyu and the rest will come. Also, Sun Yi will probably inform the 13 Yu guards after receiving the news. Chu Luiwei widened her eyes slightly and said after a while. Yay. From then on Xiao had been traveling with her. Thinking about it, these things should have been done before that. Xiao raised his eyebrows and didn't deny it. He had originally planned to bring Chu Luiwei back from the Phoenix Mountain and wait for everything to be ready before getting married. However, too many accidents had happened later, so it had been delayed until now. Do you blame me for not discussing it with you before? Xiao lowered his voice. But I don't want to wait any longer. Chu Luiwei's heart suddenly seemed to have been hit by something. Her eyes were slightly hot as she nodded with a smile. Me too. Let's go home. Look. Someone's coming. Shangguanjing suddenly noticed something and looked up. Suddenly his eyes narrowed. The two figures in front. Why do they look so familiar? That's Xiao and Yu. Nansuhui followed his line of sight and was pleasantly surprised. Although Chu Ning's cultivation realm was low, he had an indestructible divine body, so his eyesight was not bad. He looked over as well and immediately became excited. It's indeed you and them. Shangguanjing had already rushed forward. Nansuhui looked back at the Xian formation and waved his sleeve, causing the light to disperse. Then he and Chu Ning also followed. You Shangguanjing was the fastest and soon shortened the distance between them. Chu Luiwei and Xiao also noticed them and immediately sped up. Taizu. Father. Master. Previously the people of Divine Dragon Island had rejected them outside, and Dumpling had said a lot, so she guessed that they should still be waiting outside. As expected. Hearing her voice, the few of them were overjoyed. Shangguanjing went forward and couldn't hide his excitement. He first looked up and down at Chu Luiwei. How are you? Did you get hurt on Divine Dragon Island? They didn't do anything to you, right? Chu Luiwei felt warm in her heart and said with a smile. Taizu, don't worry. Don't you see that I'm fine? As she said that, she deliberately turned half a circle so that the few of them could see clearly. Actually, she did suffer a little injury on Divine Dragon Island. But those were not worth mentioning. Coupled with her strong recovery ability, there were almost no scars on her body at this time. Moreover, the situation inside was also quite good. Shangguanjing saw that her complexion was indeed good and was relieved. That's good, that's good. Nansuhui and Chu Ning also rushed over at this time. Nansuhui first looked at Chu Luiwei and then looked at Xiao. Are you all right? Xiao nodded. Only then did Nansuhui's hanging heart calm down. As long as he was here, there was no need to worry. How did you come out? Chu Ning asked. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1779. It's a long story. Let's return to the Yuntian Tower first and talk about it on the way. Chu Liwei said. Shangguan Jing and the others saw that she and Rongxiu seemed to be in good condition, so they nodded in agreement. The group went on their way back to the Yuntian Tower. On the way, Chu Liwei briefly told them what had happened during this period of time. That's what happened. In the process of speaking, Chu Liwei tried her best to be calm and left out many things. However, after she finished speaking, Shangguan Jing and the other two were still deeply shocked. After a short silence, the three of them asked in unison. You met the great phoenix dragon's genius, Mao Zhen, 1,000 years ago and even helped him reconstruct his body? Not only was the great phoenix dragon's clan leader, Mao Yang, stripped of his position, but he was also crippled? You have a relationship with the great phoenix dragon's new clan leader, and he personally sent you out. It was no wonder that the three of them had so many questions. These things were too shocking. After all, the three of them had seen many big scenes. The fact that they had such a big reaction showed how terrifying the impact of these things was. But in reality, their reactions were very normal. Any one of the things that Chu Liwei said just now would cause a huge uproar in the Divine Ruins world. However, when she told Rongxiu about these things, her expression was too calm. It almost made people think that they did not take those things to heart. Faced with their questions, Chu Liwei did not know whether to laugh or cry. However, she patiently explained them one by one. What I said just now is true. Otherwise, how could we leave Divine Dragon Island unscathed? The few of them were speechless and looked at each other. That was true. No matter how strong the two of them were, it was impossible for them to pass through the Divine Dragon Island's layers of barriers without anyone noticing. After a moment of silence, Nan Suhuai could not help but shake his head and smile. Hey, you guys have already thought of a way to leave. That's why you didn't come back through the teleportation formation. Chu Liwei smiled apologetically. I'm sorry to have worried you, Master. Nan Suhuai laughed, his face full of pride. What are you talking about? Master's happy for you. Is indeed outstanding. Was this something an ordinary person could do? Only the two of them could work together perfectly to achieve such a result. If this matter were to spread out, who knew how many jaws would drop and how many people would be secretly envious and amazed. Nan Suhuai was truly happy. After so many years, Yura had also become stronger and stronger. Since the matter with the great phoenix dragon has been settled and you are friends with Mao Zhen, you don't have to worry about the great phoenix dragon anymore. This could be considered a blessing in disguise. Shangguan Jing lamented as he looked at the two of them. This was definitely not an exaggeration but an absolute fact. One had to know that in the world, there were countless sects and clans that wanted to climb up to the great phoenix dragon. Their strength was even more powerful than those first-rate families. However, the great phoenix dragon was an ancient divine beast. Like the crimson gold heavenly phoenix, it had always been extremely arrogant. It had never placed the human race in its eyes, nor did it have any dealings with them. These years, the great phoenix dragon's situation was slightly better, but it was obviously just a superficial relationship. There was no one who had close dealings with these two clans openly and fairly. Now Chu Liwei and Rongxiu had obviously succeeded in building a relationship with Mao Zhen. Moreover, it was a relationship that the other party was willing to help. How could they not be shocked? How could they not be happy? Chu Liwei smiled and nodded. In fact, she felt the same way. Originally, because of Dumpling, she had always been biased against the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. She had never thought that she could coexist peacefully with the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. Moreover, the other party was the clan leader. It was already very difficult for an ordinary person to have a relationship with one of the two clans. Now she had miraculously maintained a good relationship with both clans. Moreover, the two divine beasts she had contracted also had extremely close relations with the two clans. This was indeed not something that could be explained by the word luck. After the three of them calmed down a little, Chu Liwei said, "By the way, there's another important matter when we return to the Yuntian Tower this time." At this point she paused. Shangguan Jing and the other two looked over. Chu Liu's red lips curled up slightly, and a faint blush appeared on her cheeks. Rongxiu held her hand and smiled. "You and I have decided to get married directly when we return this time." The Nan clan. The entire mountain peak and the entire courtyard were cold and cheerless. The atmosphere was cold and stagnant, almost suffocating. Especially when they were close to the inner courtyard, this feeling became stronger. The servants were cautious and even their breathing became cautious. This situation had been going on for a month. Ever since the clan leader brought the eldest young master and the second young miss back, it had been like this. Although the higher-ups had blocked the news, many people in the clan still vaguely guessed something. The eldest young master and the second young miss seemed to have suffered extremely serious injuries outside before returning. On the first day they arrived at the Nan clan, they called over all the celestial physicians in the clan. Several celestial physicians stayed in the room for 2 days and 2 nights. It was not until the morning of the third day that the elders came out one after another. However, their expressions were not very good. Some people secretly speculated that the two's situation this time was not optimistic. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1780. In the room, Nan Yi leaned against the head of the bed with a pale face. She was covered with a thick brocade quilt and her eyes were empty as she stared blankly ahead. She looked like she had lost her soul. Countless images flashed through her mind, but they also seemed to be blank. Nothing was left behind, only a blurry mass. A maidservant pushed open the door and came in, carefully handing over a small bowl made of blue and white bone. "Second miss, it's time to drink your medicine." Ah. Before she could finish her sentence, Nan Yi suddenly pulled out a whip from under the bed and ruthlessly whipped the maidservant's head. The servant girl couldn't dodge in time and was hit directly. A long scar extended from her scalp all the way to the corner of her mouth, easily cutting through her delicate and young face. Flesh and blood rolled and the stench was horrifying. The servant girl screamed in pain and the small bowl in her hand fell to the ground, shattering into pieces. She fell to the ground and a few more shards pierced into her palm, causing her to bleed profusely. The pain was getting worse. She looked up in panic and fear and saw that Nan Yi had looked over at some point. Her eyes were scarlet and terrifying, as sinister as a ghost. It was as if she wanted to cut her into pieces. The servant girl trembled violently and immediately stopped crying. She knelt on the ground and cried and begged. "Second miss, I know my mistake. I know my mistake." Actually, she really didn't know what she had done wrong to anger Second Mississippi. But Second Miss was angry and it was her fault. During this period of time, there had been rumors in the family that Second Miss's temperament had changed drastically after she returned. In the past she was just spoiled and willful, but now she had become unpredictable, irritable, and would take people's lives at the drop of a hat. In the month since she returned, 3 servants had already died in her hands. As for those who were injured, there were countless. She was afraid that she would be the one to be killed, so she ignored the pain on her body and desperately admitted her mistake to beg for mercy. But this servant girl didn't know that the more she acted like this, the worse Nan Yi's mood became. The blood in Nan Yi's eyes gathered rapidly and she almost went crazy. So noisy. Damn it. She clenched the whip in her hand and was about to strike again when the door was pushed open. Yi. Suddenly a figure walked over quickly. It was Nan Yifan. Nan Yi stopped what she was doing. Nan Yifan quickly sized up the situation in the room, his brows furrowed. When he was walking outside just now, he heard a scream coming from inside the house. He immediately guessed that Nan Yi must have made a fuss again. True enough. He waved his hand at the maidservant. "You can leave first. Recuperate well during this period of time. There's no need to serve me again." The maidservant immediately felt as if she had been pardoned and thanked him profusely before leaving. The room quickly quieted down again, leaving only a mess on the floor. Anger surged in Nan Yifan's chest and abdomen. When are you going to stop? 1 or 2 days would have been fine, but it had already been a month. It hasn't stopped yet. The entire Nan family was talking about this and it was obvious that they were very dissatisfied with Nan Yi. Although Nan Yi was the second miss of the family, it didn't mean that she could do whatever she wanted in the Nan family. One had to know that he didn't have the final say in the Nan family. The elders and seniors were usually very polite to him, but if he did something wrong he would also be punished. Not to mention Nan Yi. If this continued, how was he going to explain to the Nan family? Hearing the faint reprimand in his words, Nan Yi's eyes reddened and tears fell. She didn't argue and just lowered her head, allowing her tears to fall on the brocade quilt. Seeing her like this, Nan Yifan's heart softened again. After all, she was the apple of his eye that he had doted on for so many years. How could his heart not ache? She used to be so proud, so it was normal for her to find it hard to accept the current situation. Nan Yifan sighed and walked over to sit by the bed. Be good. Give me the whip. Nan Yi paused for a moment before she slowly handed the whip over. Nan Yifan had only wanted to leave the whip for her to protect herself, but now he would rather send more people outside than continue to leave the whip to Nan Yi. After taking the whip, Nan Yifan patted her hand gently and said earnestly, "Don't worry. I know that you feel wronged and upset. But it's not a solution to go on like this, right? Those servants didn't do anything wrong in the first place. If you vent your anger on them, not only will it not help your condition at all, it will also cause the family to criticize you." He paused and a bitter expression appeared on his face. "You know your elder brother's situation. Unless there is a miracle, he will be crippled for the rest of his life. This matter, other than a celestial physician that I trust, no one else in the family knows about it. How dare he say it?" He had groomed Nan Yuxing for so many years and spent so much effort. In the end, he was crippled just like that. Moreover, he only had this one son. This also meant that the position of the head of the family would have to be passed to someone else in the future. The Nan family was huge and there were a total of 3 branches. The position of the head of the family was usually fought for by the people of these 3 branches. For so many years he had groomed Nan Yuxing with all his might, hoping that he would become extremely outstanding. In this way he would be able to pass the position to Nan Yuxing. If his bloodline couldn't make it, there would be plenty of people who wanted to replace him. There were countless people who secretly coveted the position of the head of the family. Of course, this was not what Nan Yifan wanted to see. Hearing this, Nan Yi's tears stopped. She wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes and looked up at Nan Yifan. There was anger and indignation on her face. Of course, the position of the head of the family could only belong to them. But very quickly her face was covered with a layer of defeat. So what if she was angry? So what if she was indignant? The news that her elder brother's Yuan Meridian was crippled and he had become a cripple could be hidden for a while but not forever. The people in the family would find out sooner or later. And the matter of her being mute. Everyone thought that she was unwilling to speak because she was in a bad mood. But as time passed they would definitely find out. At that time the result would be even worse. And the culprit of all this was still living a carefree life. At that thought, Nan Yi held Nan Yifan's hand and looked at him anxiously. Nan Yifan immediately understood what she meant. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Don't think about this for now. You should recuperate first." Nan Yi flung his hand away as a desperate and strange smile appeared on her face. She had long guessed that her father did not intend to help them take revenge. He wanted them to swallow all the pain and torture. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1781. Nan Yifan felt a sharp pain in his heart when he saw the look in her eyes. He didn't want this to happen either. His own children were crippled. How could he not feel heartache and not want to avenge them? But the opponent was Wuxia. If they were in the right he could still fight for it. But the truth was most of the blame was on themselves. If he hadn't thought of snatching Wuxia from Shangguanyu at that time. If Yuxing hadn't provoked the other party time and time again in the god-slaying tomb. If they had immediately stopped when they sensed that something was wrong and stayed away from Wuxia and the rest, things wouldn't have turned out like this. But it was too late to say anything now. The air in the room seemed to have frozen. Nan Yi turned her head away and closed her eyes in despair. Obviously, she didn't want to continue talking to Nan Yifan. Nan Yifan felt very uncomfortable with such a resistant attitude. He had wanted to comfort her, but in the end, they parted on bad terms. He knew that it was useless to say anything now. After looking at Nan Yi for a while, he stood up. He pulled the blanket over Nan Yi, wanting to cover her, but Nan Yi snatched it away. Her actions were crisp and full of resistance. Nan Yifan's hand hung awkwardly in the air. He glanced at Nan Yi and sighed in his heart. His fingers curled up. "I will get someone to send another bowl of medicine over. If you don't like these servants, you can get someone else to do it. Don't do this again in the future." With that he turned around and left. When he reached the door, Nan Yifan paused. He placed a hand on the door and said without turning back. "I know you don't take Yuntian Tower seriously, but Wuxia is indeed someone you can't afford to offend. There are some things you will understand in the future." With that he pushed the door open and left. After a while, Nan Yi opened her eyes. The room was so silent that it almost made her panic. She turned back to look at the door and frowned. She had never seen her father so afraid of anyone. Could it be that Wuxia was hiding some secrets? But wasn't he the holy son of the Yuntian Tower? Nan Yi was silent for a long time. A trace of struggle flashed through her eyes, but in the end she still took out a green jade whistle. She placed the jade whistle next to her lips and blew hard. An extremely soft and sharp cry rang out. However, it also disappeared very quickly. Other than herself, almost no one else heard it. Even Nan Yifan, who had just left, did not notice. Nan Yifan put away the jade whistle and crossed his hands in front of him. He closed his eyes as if he was waiting for something. About a quarter of an hour later, someone came to deliver the medicine. Tuk tuk. Second miss, your medicine is ready. I'll do it. A man's deep voice rang out, interrupting the servant's words and taking the decoction directly. The manservant was feeling nervous, but when he saw who it was, he was overjoyed. Greetings, Elder Luo Yan. Then this medicine. I'll make sure Yi drinks it. You can leave first. Sigh. Yes. Luo Yan had a high status, so the manservant naturally didn't dare to disobey his words. He didn't want to come at first. Who didn't know that most of the people who came to serve second miss recently had gotten into trouble. Now that there was someone helping, it couldn't be better. After bowing, the manservant left in a hurry. Luo Yan pushed the door open and entered. When Nan Yi saw him, a look of grievance appeared on her face and her tears fell again. Luo Yan's heart ached when he saw her like this. Why are you still so haggard? Is the medicine not effective? Because he was worried that it would arouse everyone's suspicions about her health, he had only come to see Nan Yi once since he returned. This was the second time. He thought that Nan Yi's health should be much better, but he didn't expect that after such a long time, there still didn't seem to be any improvement. Nan Yi shook her head. Luo Yan frowned even more and walked over to size Nan Yi up carefully. Actually, Nan Yi's injuries in the god-slaying tomb weren't fatal. Logically speaking, as long as she came back and recuperated, she should be able to recover. But after so long, Luo Yan looked at her red and swollen eyes and immediately understood something. Perhaps, it was still the heart that was difficult to treat. Nan Yi used to be very lively. Now that she couldn't speak, it was normal that she couldn't get over it for a long time. He sent the medicine over. No matter what, the most important thing is to take good care of your health. Nan Yi nodded obediently and drank the medicine. The medicine was bitter, but her heart was even more bitter. Luo Yan's heart ached even more when he saw her obedient and silent appearance. Do you have something to say to me, or? He had specially left that jade whistle for Nan Yi. As long as Nan Yi blew it, he would be able to sense it immediately, but others wouldn't be able to hear it. This was the first time Nan Yi had blown the whistle in the past month. Nan Yi nodded, took out a pen and paper, wrote a few lines and handed it to Luo Yan. Luo Yan took the paper and looked at it carefully. Then he was shocked and looked at Nan Yi with furrowed brows. No, I can't agree to it. With that, Luo Yan got up and was about to leave. You have to stay here and recuperate during this period of time. You can't go anywhere. Nan Yi tugged at his sleeve and whimpered. Her eyes were filled with pleading. Luo Yan stopped in his tracks. He turned back and met Nan Yi's tear-filled eyes. In the past, she often begged him for help like this. Every time he saw this pair of eyes that were very similar to her mother's, his heart would always soften. Even if she occasionally made a mistake, as long as she showed such an expression, he couldn't bear to scold her. But this time, Luo Yan sighed. This definitely won't do. Your injuries haven't healed yet. I can't agree to these things. Nan Yi slowly let go and suddenly smiled. Desolate and desperate. Luo Yan's heart seemed to have been hit hard by something. After a long pause, he finally said, Okay, I promise you. Nan Yi immediately looked up at him in surprise. In a moment of excitement, she pounced over and hugged Luo Yan's neck. She knew that at this time, the only person she could rely on was Uncle Luo Yan. Luo Yan's hand froze, but he quickly returned to normal and patted her back gently. Don't worry, I will protect you well. Nan Yifan naturally didn't know what was going on here. After leaving Nan Yi's place, he wanted to go back to the study to calm down, but halfway there he turned around and went to Nan Yuxing's place. Nan Yuxing lived in one of the most noble courtyards in the entire Nan family. In the past, this place had always been bustling with people coming and going. But now it was cold and cheerless all the way. Other than the guards in charge of guarding, there was almost no one else here. Of course, this was because Nan Yifan had specially ordered that no one was allowed to approach this place and disturb Nan Yuxing's rest. He walked to the entrance of the courtyard. The two guards immediately bowed. "Greetings, Patriarch." Nan Yifan nodded. "How is eldest young master?" Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1782. The two guards looked at each other. "My lord, everything is normal." Nan Yifan asked again, "Did anyone come in the past 2 days?" The two guards shook their heads. No one else came except for Elder Nan Yi. Elder Nan Yi was the celestial physician that Nan Yifan trusted the most. He was also the only one who knew about Nan Yuxing's condition other than the people in the god-slaying tomb. After they returned, Nan Yifan handed Nan Yuxing to him. However, a month had passed. Although Nan Yuxing's external injuries had mostly healed, there was still no improvement on his internal injuries. It was difficult to repair a damaged yuan meridian. Nan Yifan lifted his foot and walked inside. It was noon and the sun was shining brightly. Nan Yifan pushed the door open and entered without knocking. As soon as he entered, a strong and bitter smell of medicine rushed to his nose, almost suffocating him. Nan Yifan frowned and looked around. The windows were all locked and the whole room looked gloomy. The faint smell of blood mixed with the bitter smell of medicine was very uncomfortable. Sunlight poured in through the door and tore apart the dead silence, but it could not dispel the aura of death. Nan Yifan walked in. Walking around the screen, he saw Nan Yuxing lying on the bed. Nan Yuxing's condition was worse than Nan Yi's. At this moment he was lying on the bed with his eyes closed. His face was pale and haggard. His face was unshaven and his lips were cracked. Blood vessels could be seen vaguely. His originally handsome face was now a sickly color, and his cheeks were deeply sunken. His breath was weak like an old man with one foot in the grave. There was no trace of the arrogance of the young master of the Nan family. Hearing Nan Yifan's voice, Nan Yuxing's eyes moved, but he did not open them. Nan Yifan walked over and stood by the bed. He stared at him for a long time before saying, "Do you plan to continue like this?" Nan Yuxing's eyelashes fluttered and he finally opened his eyes with difficulty. However, he did not look at Nan Yifan. He just stared at the ceiling. His eyes were dead and filled with despair and mockery. After a long while he spoke with a hoarse voice. "What else can I do?" He was already crippled. His originally limitless future had now turned into a bottomless abyss. What was the point of living? In this world, there was nothing that could destroy a person's willpower more than falling from the clouds into a quagmire. Nan Yuxing was the same. Ever since he was young, he had been the pride of the heavens and had been chased by everyone, enjoying the limelight. In a single night he had become a cripple. Everything that had happened in the past had become a thing of the past. How could he bear it? Nan Yifan paused. "Elder Nan Yi has been searching for a way to help you recover your yuan meridian." Nan Yuxing suddenly laughed. His voice was extremely soft and sarcastic. "Father, if Elder Nan Yi really has a way, why would he wait until now?" No one knew the state of his body better than he did. His yuan meridian was completely broken and could not be repaired. Most of the things he said were just words of comfort. In reality, his heart was already dead. Nan Yifan was at a loss for words. He could tell that this was a huge blow to Nan Yuxing. If they didn't have a feasible solution, Nan Yuxing might not be able to survive. The room was silent. Nan Yuxing suddenly asked, "Father, after a while, the entire Nan family will know that I have become a cripple, right?" Nan Yifan frowned. Every word in this sentence made him feel incomparably uncomfortable. "It's all because your son is useless. I have wasted all your efforts over the years." Nan Yuxing laughed at himself. After a moment of silence, he finally turned his head and looked at Nan Yifan. "Father, I want to ask you for a favor." Nan Yifan stepped forward and nodded. "Just say it." Nan Yuxing's expression became a little strange. Instead of dragging out an ignoble existence like this, becoming a cripple and being mocked by others, it's better to just die. Nan Yifan's pupils contracted. Nan Yuxing did not seem to notice the change in his father's expression and continued. "Those people are unreliable. Why don't you do it yourself? Today. In the future, to the outside world, you can just say that I died from serious injuries or any other reason will do. Anyway, as long as you don't say that I have become a cripple. The more Nan Yuxing spoke, the brighter his eyes became. He seemed to think that this was a good idea. That excited and even expectant expression made Nan Yifan feel a chill in his heart. King, what nonsense are you talking about? Nan Yifan shouted harshly. Nan Yifan didn't care about his anger at all and even laughed in a low voice. You know it too, don't you? If I live like this, I will only become a pitiful and laughable cripple. What's the point of that? It was better to die now. When people talked about him, they would say, it's a pity that he died young. Nan Yuxing really regretted it. Back in the God-slain tomb, he should have just killed himself. Why did he have to come back and bear all this? Looking at his son's fervent and crazy face, Nan Yifan suddenly could not reprimand him. It was as if something was stuck in his chest, making him feel very uncomfortable. After a long silence, he suddenly said, "Don't worry, father will help you think of a way." With that, he turned and left. Nan Yuxing looked at his back that disappeared outside the door. The smile on his face gradually faded, and a trace of defeat and self-mockery appeared in his eyes. Since they had already reached such a state, what else could they do? The two guards in charge of guarding the courtyard heard footsteps and looked back. When they saw Nan Yuxing come out so quickly, they were surprised. How long had the family head been in there? It hasn't even been a quarter of an hour, right? He came out so quickly. When Nan Yifan walked closer, they realized that his face was rather ugly. The two looked at each other, then quickly retracted their gazes and waited respectfully. Nan Yifan walked over. When he passed by the two, his footsteps paused. During this period, you must keep a close watch on the eldest young master. If anything happens to the eldest young master, both of you will be buried with him. The two were shocked and quickly responded, yes. Only then did Nan Yifan leave. Nan Yifan returned to the study with a heavy heart and sat alone for a long time. In the Divine Ruins world, there was indeed a top figure who might be able to help Nan Yuxing repair his Yuan meridian. But that person was not easy to get along with and had a very strange temper. Even if he personally went, he might not be able to persuade him. If he had any other choice, he would not want to have anything to do with him. But when he thought of Nan Yuxing begging him to end his life, Nan Yifan did not care about anything else. After struggling for a long time, when dusk fell, the afterglow of the setting sun shone in through the window. A trace of determination flashed in his eyes and he finally stood up. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1783. Invite Elder Nan Yi and Elder Wu Ping over. Nan Yifan ordered the people outside. The two elders quickly rushed over and entered the study one after another. Nan Yifan was writing something on the table. Master. The two elders bowed together. Nan Yifan nodded and didn't stop writing. The two elders tactfully waited in silence. About half an hour later, Nan Yifan finally stopped writing. He picked up the paper and read it carefully before looking at the two elders in front of him. I invited the two elders here today because I have something important to discuss. Nan Yifan went straight to the point. I plan to go out for a trip. It will take about 10 days. During this time, I'll leave everything in the family to the two of you. The two elders were astonished. Elder Nan Yi asked, "Where are you going, master? Is it going to take that long?" Nan Yifan was very strong and could travel quickly. Under normal circumstances, even if he wanted to go out for business, it wouldn't take more than 10 days. Moreover, the Nan family was in an extremely sensitive and critical period. If he left now and something happened, Yuxing's condition can't be delayed any longer. I know someone who might have a way and I plan to ask him personally. If he can cure Yuxing's illness, that would be the best. If not, then I'll have no regrets. Elder Nan Yi was even more surprised. There's such a person in the world. He was a celestial physician, an extremely powerful existence among celestial physicians. However, he was still helpless in the face of Nan Yuxing's condition. Someone who could cure Nan Yuxing. Wouldn't that be better than him? That was a person who only existed in rumors. If you can really ask this person to cure eldest young master's illness, that would be great. Elder Wu Ping wasn't so optimistic. He glanced at Nan Yifan and saw that he didn't look relaxed. After thinking for a while he asked, Master, is this person very difficult to ask? Nan Yifan smiled bitterly and nodded. It wasn't just difficult to ask, there were many other troubles. This was also why he didn't choose this path when Nan Yuxing was first crippled. If it wasn't for Nan Yuxing's words today, he wouldn't have done it no matter what. Now there was really no other way. Yuxing and Yi's situation isn't very good right now. Many people in the clan are watching them. You must pay more attention. Before I return, you must not reveal their situation to anyone. Furthermore, my whereabouts this time around are to be kept a secret. If anyone asks, just tell them that I'm in closed-door training. The two elders answered and saluted. Rest assured, Patriarch. Only then did Nan Yifan feel relieved. He handed the piece of paper he had written earlier to Elder Wu Peng. If someone discovers that something is wrong and I haven't returned in time, Wu Peng, you will take over the responsibility of the Patriarch. This handwritten letter will be kept as a keepsake. Elder Wu Peng's expression froze. At this point he had a faint premonition that Nan Yifan's trip would be very dangerous. He took the letter with both hands, hesitated for a moment and said, Patriarch, since this trip is dangerous, then, should we add more people? That's not necessary. Nan Yifan lightly waved his hand. A bright teleportation formation suddenly appeared in the middle of the study. He lifted his foot and walked over. I'll handle this matter myself. You just have to stay here and watch over everything. Seeing that he had made up his mind, the two elders didn't try to persuade him. Farewell, Patriarch. Nan Yifan nodded. The next moment light flashed. The teleportation formation slowly rotated. Nan Yifan's figure soon disappeared. Yuntian Tower. Everyone had received the news in advance that the Holy Sun would return with the princess today. Thus, the elders had gathered in the ethereal hall early in the morning and were waiting. Everyone looked out of the hall from time to time. Previously, the Holy Sun said that he would go to the Phoenix God Mountain to bring the princess back. Why did it take so long? Speaking of which, it's strange. Wasn't the princess always in Lingshao Academy? Why did she suddenly go to the Phoenix God Mountain? That's because the princess and the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan have a lot of conflicts. Don't you know that the princess has contracted with a Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix? Hiss. Are you serious? Didn't they say that ancient divine beasts don't contract with humans? Then the princess's Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix is. Actually, I don't know if the princess is too lucky or too unlucky. Her Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix is actually the Crimson-tailed Phoenix from before. There are so many crimson-tailed phoenixes in the world, but there are very few who can advance further. It has to be said that this is an opportunity that ordinary people can only envy. But this is where the trouble lies. If it was another divine beast, there wouldn't be any problem. But what kind of existence was the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix? For so many years they had almost never interacted with humans. How could they let this matter go so easily? That's true. It seems that the Scarlet Gold Heavenly Phoenix clan's patriarch, Yi Zhao, personally wrote a letter to the Spirit Firmament Academy, asking the princess to personally visit. His Highness the Holy Sun went down for so long before returning. In other words, the Holy Sun must have paid a heavy price to help Shangguanyu this time. Everyone discussed animatedly. Most of them had the same opinion about this matter. After all, the Great Void Phoenix Dragon clan was famous for being arrogant and prideful. Especially Yi Zhao, he was very difficult to deal with. It wasn't surprising that they would think this way. 36 respected Elder Ming sat in his seat and leaned against the back of the chair. He listened to the various discussions with a relaxed expression. Since the Holy Sun has brought the princess back, it means that the matter has been successfully resolved. What's there to worry about? The hall fell silent for a moment. That was true, but who knew what the inside story was? Someone asked. 36 respected Elder Ming, aren't you worried at all? That Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan is not to be trifled with. 36 respected Elder Ming laughed out loud. So what? Don't forget that the princess's Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix has been with her since a few years ago. It's just a coincidence that it broke through now. Even if the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan wants to do something, they have to be reasonable, right? Besides, the Holy Sun and the princess aren't ordinary people. How can they be bullied by them? These words were really irrefutable. The person who asked the question still wanted to say something, but he was stopped by the person next to him. Don't ask. 36 respected Elder Ming is famous for being protective of our princess consort. Even if there's really any trouble because of this, he won't say anything bad about the princess. Hearing this, that person swallowed the rest of his words. At this moment, someone hurried in from outside. 36 Respected Elder Ming Shangguanyu is here. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1784. The hall instantly fell silent. Quite a few people looked surprised. Shangguanyu? Who is that? It sounds like he's from the princess consort side? 36 Respected Elder Ming's eyes lit up and he stood up. Hurry up and invite him in. Yes. The guards retreated respectfully. Only the people in the hall were left looking at each other. Respected Elder Pure Dust probed. 36 Respected Elder Ming, this Shangguanyu. May I know who he is? 36 Respected Elder Ming chuckled. He is the princess consort's father. Everyone understood. It was indeed that person from the Tianling dynasty. But why did he suddenly invite him over? Suddenly, someone seemed to have thought of something. Could it be that His Highness is planning to hold a grand wedding? 36 Respected Elder Ming stroked his beard with a smile. This was a tacit agreement. Many people were stunned on the spot and it took them a while to react. Actually, it was indeed time for His Highness to hold a grand wedding. After all, it had been a long time since the princess consort selection. During this time, His Highness had mentioned a few times that he wanted to hold a grand wedding, but it was delayed by various things. As a result, everyone gradually forgot about this matter. Now that they suddenly heard it, it was inevitable that they would be surprised. No wonder the princess consort's father was invited. Since their daughter was getting married, their parents naturally had to come. Soon an unfamiliar figure appeared outside the hall. The guard's voice sounded. Everyone turned to look at him. Most of them were curious about what the princess consort's family was like. Shangguanyu came to the front of the hall and looked up. The ethereal hall. It was grand and dignified. Even before they entered, they could already feel a heavy pressure pressing down on them silently. Shangguanyu recalled what he had seen and heard along the way and he still felt like he was in a dream. This was the place where Yue was now? Shangguanyu had heard of the Divine Ruins world and later he learned a lot about it, including the Yuntian Tower. He knew that any sect in the Divine Ruins world was stronger than the Tianling dynasty. Among them, the Yuntian Tower was one of the best. However, when he really arrived here, he realized that everything was even more. For a moment, Shangguanyu did not know what words to use to describe his inner feelings. He only felt that something was surging between his chest and abdomen. Lord Shangguan, all the revered elders are waiting inside, please. With a warm smile on his face, Yuemo politely and respectfully invited Shangguanyu in. Although Shangguanyu was the Tianling emperor, they were currently in the Divine Ruins world, so it was naturally inappropriate for him to address him as such. After thinking for a while, Shangguanyu took the initiative to suggest that he should call himself that. In any case, it was just a title. The most important thing was to come and see you. Shangguanyu nodded and walked into the main hall. The moment Shangguanyu came in, countless eyes fell on him. He looked to be in his 40s and wore a navy blue brocade robe. Although there were traces of age on his face, it still couldn't hide the handsomeness and elegance of his youth. Shangguanyu's appearance was indeed somewhat similar to his. Most importantly, he exuded an extraordinary aura. Even though he came from outside the Divine Ruins world, he was still able to walk calmly in the ethereal hall where experts gathered. Many people thought to themselves, the people of the Shangguan family all seem to have such vigor? Be it Shangguanyu or the current Shangguanyu, they didn't seem to know what fear and cowardice were. People outside of the Divine Ruins world, even if they were born as monarchs, would often show some cowardice and fear when facing them. However, Shangguanyu was different. Lord Shangguan, you're finally here. 36 Esteemed Elder Ming stood up and walked over with a smile. Shangguanyu swiftly assessed the situation in the main hall and determined that the old man before him was the one with the highest standing in the hall. Sensing the other party's goodwill and welcome, Shangguanyu felt slightly relieved. He immediately bowed with a smile. Paying respects to 36 Esteemed Elder Ming. 36 Esteemed Elder Ming was surprised. You recognize me? He didn't remember meeting Shangguanyu before. Shangguanyu nodded with a smile. Yuemo mentioned it on the way here. I noticed that you have an extraordinary disposition, so I thought that it should be you. Everyone present could tell that he was trying to curry favor with Shangguanyu. But so what? 36 Esteemed Elder Ming was an esteemed figure. Even those from the Yuntian Tower had to be respectful to him, let alone Shangguanyu, an outsider from the Divine Ruins world. Besides, 36 esteemed Elder Ming was an extremely picky person. He wouldn't be interested in just anyone trying to curry favor with him. Haha. Lord Shangguan is too polite. 36 esteemed Elder Ming burst into laughter upon hearing those words. Clearly he was very pleased with Shangguanyu's words. This also meant that his attitude toward Shangguanyu was very friendly. Many people exchanged glances with one another. Seemed like 36 esteemed Elder Ming really thought highly of Princess Yu. Otherwise he wouldn't have given Shangguanyu so much face. The Inceptive Sage and Princess Yu are currently rushing back and they should be back today. Lord Shangguan, do you want to wait for them together? 36 esteemed Elder Ming knew that Shangguanyu must be worried about his daughter, so he took the initiative to explain. Only then did Shangguanyu understand. No wonder they hadn't seen you, or even though they had been here for so long. So it's because she hasn't returned yet? He nodded. Then I'll have to trouble you, 36 esteemed Elder Ming laughed. What's so troublesome about this? Lord Shangguan, just follow me. 36 esteemed Elder Ming actually brought Shangguanyu to the innermost part of the hall and pointed to the first seat on the right. Lord Shangguan, please take a seat. Shangguanyu hesitated for a moment. I'm afraid this isn't appropriate, right? In this hall the chairs were divided into two sides. 36 esteemed Elder Ming sat on the first seat on the left. He asked him to sit on the first seat on the right. 36 esteemed Elder Ming said. You're the Princess Yu's father and your status is honorable. Naturally you can sit on this seat. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network.